Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Bizarre. Today, we're talking about who moved my AI cheese, followed by the need for maybe a little more AI strategic planning. And then finally, we're going to take a look at this new large language model from Meta. You're watching Techstrong Gang. We'll be back in a minute. All right, folks, and we're back, and let's talk and get to our guest today. We have John Willis joining us, who has been, I don't know, John, you're probably the most involved person in AI that I personally know anyway, but John, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Yeah, great to be here.
All right, and then we have Amanda Rosani, who's the editor of Techstrong AI and Digital CXO, which is just brimming with AI copy every week. Amanda, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
And finally, Bonnie Schneider joins me today in the studio and our resident expert on all things climate. And, I got to say, you're coming up to speed on this AI stuff pretty quickly, too. So
thanks, Mike. I'm enjoying it.
This is becoming quite the quorum. All right, let's jump in here, folks. There's a couple of reports out, and I think there's 3 different surveys, and I'm not going to get into a lot of details on each one. But the thing about them all is it kind of says that we don't really know how our IT jobs are going to evolve. One suggests that software engineers have embraced these tools immensely, but they're using them with mixed success, we shall say. And a lot of folks are trying to figure out, is this better for senior DevOps engineers, or does it eliminate the need for junior DevOps engineers? Another one, though, says there's these folks called system administrators who aren't really programmers per se. They tend to use more graphical tools, and they seem to be struggling with understanding how to use Gen AI. But there's an argument that says that they might ultimately benefit more because, the Gen AI can create snippets of code for them, and they might not need as many software engineers. John, I know you've been kind of following this whole space, but let's jump in here. Where do you think all this is going to land, and how will an IT team of the future maybe be structured?
Yeah, I think we've got a huge learning curve, particularly sort of enterprises that haven't grown up really with these new models. One of the interesting fears I keep hearing from people, and it scares me a little bit too, is first you hear commonly people say, Gen AI or these LLMs are my apprentice or my assistant, right? And so there's this one thought group that says that the people that really know what they're doing are going to have their jobs for a long time. AI is not going to replace them, but more and more, maybe they're going to need less junior people because, let's face it. I did something the other day that I did a year ago on GPT 3.5, and I ran it last week on GPT 4.0, and I wrote a little sort of LinkedIn thing, and the difference was it was uncomparable, the difference of what the answer was, including code. And so the ability for these things to produce quality output is sort of easily equivalent to an apprentice or a junior admin or a junior developer. So here's the scary part is if we don't watch what we're doing in these industries, we may dry up our supply chain of people. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that's a legitimate fear that's happening, that if we keep thinking we don't need to hire as many interns, we don't need to hire as many sort of junior programmers, junior sysadmins, or junior DevOps, if you will, because we don't need as many anymore because these tools can replace them. Well, as these older sort of gurus roll off, what happens? So I think the answer is leadership needs to sort of understand this and pay a tax for apprenticeship, for learning, for those things. So that's one other thing. And then the other thing I wanted to sort of end off with was I liked the survey data because it's creating a consistent narrative, if you will, in that the surveys that you talked about, somewhere around 70% of people that are getting surveyed are saying, yes, damn the torpedoes, I'm using Gen AI. And it was about a month or two ago, Microsoft and LinkedIn had done a really extensive, 4,000 respondees, because LinkedIn, you have those people available, right? And it was very consistent. I think theirs was 70 75% are using Gen AI at work, 4,000 people surveyed. And then 78% of those are saying that doing this, what they call BYO AI, bring your own AI, which is the shadow AI thing that I also am pretty worried about. So I like the data of these surveys because it's sort of telling the same story over and over and over.
Do you think we might also look at it another way, and there's going to be a generational shift, and the newbies may be learning how to use these AI tools in college, and they'll come out as quote unquote senior engineers, and maybe the younger kids will take to it better than the senior folks.
If I had the crystal ball already, I'd be out on some Grady White. I'd be hanging out with Alan with a boat right next to him. But but I think the real fear is it's the knowledge, the contextual knowledge of a business that gets lost in this possible funnel that we might be creating. So I think you're right. I think the kids. The domain of how to go too far, but I'm really exploring this with DevOps. I think DevOps in the next 5 years is just going to be, or software engineering in general, but certainly what we do in DevOps, DevSecOps Industry, you will just have natural language conversations with generative AIs to do everything you do. I'm convinced that, that for everything that you're sort of dealing, it will know your network. It will know your sort of Terraform and topologies. You won't be sort of copying and pasting a Terraform. You will literally, this is this agentic processing they're talking about, where we go not from just, hey, ChatGPT or Copilot, write me some code or write me a Terraform. You're going to just say, go and fix this issue, or go ahead and build this feature. And there are a bunch of Open Devin, Copilot Workspace from Microsoft. These tools are already showing promise here. So I think that's going to change. But again, back to your original question, my fear is the Obi-Wan Kenobis of the large banks and the sort of the retail who understand the technology and what they call the social technical, but the business side. I think there's a fear that we could starve that out, where the young kids come in and we don't, again, the technology is getting solved. It's the expertise at a large company like Target to make a great business decision, or a business decision turns into a technology delivery where the Obi-Wan Kenobis of the company can say, hey, LLM, go ahead and give me a prototype for this solution, as opposed to, hey, junior programmer, you've been on a job, let me give you a really hard, I know how I started. I started at Exxon in the senior, and I was like, give me work. And they gave me the most complicated problems that, and I learned really fast because they were just booming and they couldn't do all the work they had to do. And they gave me, like writing an accounting system for a Cray. So I think that would be my sort of response to your question.
I kind of want to expand on your question, Mike. I think if you look far enough down to our younger generation and our kids, they're growing up more and more in this digital online world with no fear of using all these different technologies and tools. And I think AI is going to be really prevalent in their world, and they're going to take it for granted. They just use AI all the time. And they're going to have these AI skills just inherently because they're online so much more and with no fear of trying out these tools.
But again, I just, right. And I totally agree with that. But the big question is, will they get hired? Because do we really need them to solve the business problems? The Exxon or the B of A, or because the people who, at the top of the pyramid are basically don't need them because they can use, that's the.
Or maybe those kids will do what the top of the pyramid's doing at a lower cost, and that'll be a factor in the equation as well.
Could be.
All right. John, what does the team look like in the future? Because in my mind, it's starting to emerge. You talked about agents. And I think that each DevOps person or IT person is going to have, 7 or 8 agents that are specialized for different tasks that they're trying to orchestrate. But then I am part of a larger team, and everybody on the team has their own agents. So now I got 5 people with, 100 agents that need to interact with each other. How will we kind of orchestrate all this across a group?
Yeah, for the longest time, within the last 2 years of like studying this space and playing with the space and talking with people and doing some consulting with clients, I had a strong belief that, the two pizza team model needed to include an AI expert. Because I think originally, there were a lot of companies that thought we need to hire as many AI experts as we can. But then, as we started seeing it play out, it was like, no, we have really, it goes back to the sort of business people. The two pizza team, I have the network. I have the different componentry that I know how to deliver and build the right solutions. What I'm missing is this, sort of AI knowledge, a different way to think, which again, I think is the common thread between both of our topics, which, are all the sort of like, future of AI, strategy of AI is, companies are not sitting down and literally thinking about the discipline of massively training people in an organization. And one way to infuse training would be add sort of another headcount to the two pizza team. And basically, it would be a pure AI expert, and you get this, and that could be a good role for a young, young person out of college, right? They've gotten their sort of MBA or, Master's of Science on AI, and then throw them right into that, and then they get to learn. And that solves my other dilemma. But I do think the agentic thing also is another. It's one thing to say we're going to reduce coders because of Copilot and all these tools. It's another thing when you start seeing what these army of bots can do. And to be honest with you, Mike, I'm a little unclear what a team looks like. If you talk to some of the people working at the big 3, big 4, whatever they call them today, and it's in their best interest is they want to come in and write like 1 million bots for a company. This is like RPA all over again, but in a whole other level. And I like, that scares the heck out of me. Like, who's going to do the technical debt, cleanup of like 100, 10,000 bots. But maybe other bots, I don't know, but agents. So I think the agent thing is really interesting because these agentic, they're the sort of the poster child term for this now is agentic dev tools or agentic DevOps or agentic. And it really is the combination of LLMs being orchestrated in such a way and personas that can say, hey, I'm a system engineer, I'm a developer, and you literally start routing work in a very function-oriented way. So I don't know. I think it's a little early in this agentic discussion to really understand what teams are going to look like.
There's probably also some resistance because nobody wants to think that a new technology is going to replace them. I mean, they want to use it, of course, because it's going to improve productivity, but probably there's a little bit of caution in terms of how much do we implement it, how much do we rely on it, for those that work in DevOps.
Right. Well, Bobby, I just want to add, I'm sorry to do that, but this is a thread that was in those surveys as well. I thought shadow AI was going to happen because people couldn't wait and they needed it faster. But some of the surveys are pointing out that people's fear of telling leadership that they're using AI might play into the we don't need you anymore. So that's
exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So to that point, John, who should be responsible for teaching these people and training them? And it's an ongoing debate, but do I, as the employee, need to really drive this on my own, or should organizations have some responsibility for training their squads? Because a lot of times I think a lot of leaders think it's on the employee to stay current.
Yeah, no, I think that's the wrong decision. I might have mentioned in one of our previous discussions, but I was at a large conference, and one of the guys who it was Cigna. They said this publicly. So they have the guy who basically pioneered their whole cloud journey, right? And sort of like talk about lessons learned, right? And one of the things they learned through that process is they didn't do a global education program on cloud. And so he was brought in to help this sort of new strategy goal for, like they had a cloud leadership team. Now they have an AI leadership team, right? So bring everybody in, bring the important players across HR, different part. And he's, his first suggestion, and they have implemented, is sort of a global do's and don'ts and what you should know as sort of the training, the big corporation training is it's the most annoying stuff you have to do. But every year you have to go through this thing, and it won't let you it won't let you cheat. Like you have to answer questions. It paces you. You can't finish it quicker, and make it one of those. So it actually is, and I'm not a permanent record. I feel like I'm not like a Tayloristic, everything has to be, but like, I think this is one of those ones where you're sort of explained what AI means to this corporation at this time, what this corporation thinks you should be doing and what you definitely should not be doing. And then literally once you go through that thing, it registers that you've taken that class. So you can't pull the do now, ask forgiveness later. So I think global training is what is a common thread of all this sort of survey data of people saying, they don't know, they're getting started early. I think it is in the best interest of an organization to put together sort of a tiger team. I would make it a permanent team, because then that becomes another sort of team of teams of teams. Mm-hmm. But I do think there is this responsibility and really for your own sort of health as an organization to sort of figure out, you don't know everything. It's emergent. It's all nascent. But like at least sort of document and make everybody in the corporate. If 78% of the people in an organization are using this technology, you got a problem. You got a real problem here. And so it really, I think this is our state way we think about it right now. We don't know everything, but this is the way we're going to operate. And I want you to check box that you agree that you're going to operate this way.
All right, folks. Well, I'm going to leave it there, but do remember that these AI engines, if you want to call them that, and the LLMs, they get smarter every 3 or 4 months. So staying current on this is going to be a lifetime proposition, I think. We'll be back in a minute.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, folks, we're back. And initially, we just talked about what it means for IT folks, but the organizations as a whole seems like they are haphazardly moving down the path of AI. Nobody seems to actually have a strategic plan or how to think about this at scale because, well, there's tons of articles on Techstrong AI and elsewhere out there that are all talking about how it feels like to me, John, let's start with you, that we're kind of just stumbling down what to do with this stuff. And do we need to take a breath and kind of think about this in a longer time horizon?
I think the biggest obstacle to this technology is, is that it changes. David Edwards says this really well, that, we've been trying to put determinism, like sort of, truth and facts into this whole industry for 50 years, as long as sort of like large IT data centers and stuff work, right? And like, it's still a very complex world, but we've sort of gotten to like, we can define a supply chain and it's pretty clear and we can say what exactly happens and we have a lot of monitoring and data. So we've reined in this stuff. Now all of a sudden we have this technology that is unreinable. It is, I know that's not a word, but it's non-deterministic. And what we're failing to recognize is that this new way of doing things is probabilistic. It isn't like 1 + 1 will equal 2. In fact, early days of GPT 3.5, people would go, "Oh, you can't use that because it can't do math." It doesn't do math. It does approximation. This is approximate models. The answers are approximate. They get really good. And I think the hardest part for a corporation that's been literally thinking about solving IT problems, including software and delivery, all the security, as a controlling, how much more can we control? And that is the sort of the fatal flaw. It is a fatal flaw thinking in these new generative AI models. People talk about hallucinations. Yes, hallucinations, approximate answers. based on the data. So I think there's sort of embracing and understanding that you're dealing with a different type of world. And I think that's where people come in. I was telling you earlier, I mean, one of the things I hear over and over is the way you solve this problem is better data classification. No, that's not an approximate. The way you solve this problem is get a better approximations of unstructured data. In fact, we've talked about this. IDC did a report last year that 90% of the data in a large organization, a commercial organization or a large organization, is unstructured. And we manage 10% of it. That's the gold. So it isn't about turning that 90% into structure, because the 90% is like spreadsheets, it's wikis, and the goal of this thing, the gold, GOLD, is that I can take that data and like turn it into knowledge in a way I could never do in the past. But if I start thinking about like, how do I, the trap of like, how do I take this is what we've been trying to do for years. How do I take all those spreadsheets and wikis and turn it into tables? And then the tables can be like, that's why we've never gotten close to what we're getting with generative AI and these common LLMs now, small. So again, I think there's not only is like training, but it's also like having where they break the bone to heal in terms of a way that we think about these problems differently than the way we've been thinking about solving these problems. And I don't know if that made sense, but
no, I'm with you. And to your point about deterministic versus approximations, I think, there are certain things that we want to have done the same way over and over again. But if I think about the way we humans make decisions, for the most part, we're using our experience to kind of make a guess ourselves, which isn't much different than what the machines are doing. And who guesses better is still up to debate in my mind, because a lot of times, to be honest, people are making quote unquote gut decisions, but was that gut decision, indigestion from what they had for breakfast, or was it really experience? It seems like the way we humans get around that is we have a bunch of us together make decisions and gut check each other. So won't the machines kind of do the same thing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not to go too deep, but there's really three forms of inference, right? And sort of going back to Aristotle, right? To Aristotle, but like there's deductive reasoning, there's inductive reasoning, and there's abductive reasoning. And I know I'm going sort of crazy, but this is really important because and now what we're seeing is at least the two of them, deductive and inductive, actually coming into play. Like deductive is more like the symbolic expert systems we've had over the years. The inductive is the sort of neural networks, what they call subsymbolic, right? And the reason why, like, I'm not just throwing out big words to make me sound impressive. The reason this is important is what we're starting to learn more and more is how does humans really, to your point, really make decisions? And it's a combination of really all three, which we really haven't explored in generative AI, which is abductive. And inductive is instinct and guesses. And so this is the beauty of marrying Gen AI with humans. So this is why the humans, probably going to be in the front, the left airline pilot seat for some time to come, because humans do abductive reasoning, and to my knowledge, no Gen AI implementation does abductive reasoning. And abductive reasoning is the sort of the instinct. Maybe I did have a great morning, and somebody when I was getting coffee was incredibly nice to me, and I'm like, my mind is really sharp today. So when I come into that meeting, I really can actually nail problems a lot quicker than I could yesterday. Like that our ability, the Columbo effect, is what's going to work with all these sort of agentic models. So I think that is sort of if we could call it the crowdsourced version of this working properly. And I think you're right. The human element will probably, and there's a lot of people believe that maybe there won't be AGI ever, or AGI within 100 years, because of the humans have this other superpower, which is our instinct, our common sense. And again, I'm not like at the Hinton or LeCun level to explain what they do, but I'm pretty certain none of their models have the sort of common sense instinct that it'll take.
It also depends on how you interact with AI, and also this is a pitfall of it, is the bias in the data, the humans that are providing the data and how it's presented. And there is different biases that can come out. Like for a human, John's right. Bad experience at the coffee shop or whatever, bad day, you stub your toe, you're in a bad mood. But with AI, there can be that bias. I think that's something it was talking about crowdsourcing, but maybe having, what I find useful is to use different AI models and see, well, what does this one say? What does that one say? Because to get the consensus, and that might be something that we do going forward.
That's good. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
And I think it also comes down to, again, companies do need to understand exactly how these AI tools work and their limitations, and that they are just augmentation tools. And then they need to have a clear understanding of what problems do they have and what potential solutions could the AI tools provide, and then a clear use case and end goal moving forward, and then properly tracking it through each step to ensure that it is working as they hoped.
Bias is not a bad thing. And here's why I would say we all have biases with everybody we meet. And I'm not talking about race, creed, or color. I'm just talking about your experience with that person and how much you trust them based on their expertise. And you factor that into, if I tell you something or somebody else tells you something, you weigh that.
Yes.
And I think we need the same thing when it comes to these AI models. We need a little more transparency into how they function and what their level of accuracy is, so we can apply that bias. And so, John, do we need more transparency into these AI models? There's going to be a lot of them. We're going to mix and match them as we go along. But I think, do we trust them too much?
Yeah, no, I mean, and this is a problem, right? Because Bonnie's right, and you're both right. I mean, bias doesn't really have a negative or a positive or connotation. It's just bias. The coffee, the scenario is a bias, right? I mean, I think the biggest thing that people would say about AI, these sort of the anti-AGI people, which actually fell into this trap of, now somebody sucked me in and I'm doing a ton of research that I didn't have a whole lot of time for, but is the models can't learn like humans. That point of the coffee, the model can't be terrible on a Monday and great on a Tuesday, because on Monday the person who sold me coffee was just miserably, and the person on Tuesday was just delightful person who brightens up the rest of your day. And that's just a small of millions and maybe trillions of transactions you even have minute by minute. And so they call it this sort of monotonic learning that a model has. So, and then the thing about the bias, I have a kind of funny story. I was giving a presentation and I wanted to make a picture of myself I just stuck with ChatGPT. I didn't even use any other. And I said, here's Botch Glue, here's my bio, this is what I've done. Can you do it like this? Can you create a nice bookshelf? Like, I'm old, and make it older. And it made a really good looking old guy. It was like perfect hair. And I said, how about somebody who's more bald and a little, and the face is a little fatter. And it came back, it still made a really good looking bald. And I finally had to say to it, and there's a whole book written, Unmasking AI by Joy Balumi. So it's a brilliant book about bias. And again, there are good forms of bias and there are bad forms of bias. The good bias is it can write novels for us. The bad time of bias is it literally could have a police force arrest somebody based on a generative AI profile, right? But in this case, finally I had to say, okay, I want close to bald, older, fatter face, and not as good looking. And it literally it got reasonably close. But the problem was the training model for almost every image of a human. I think in Joy Baloomi's book, she talks about I'm just going to make the numbers up, but they're incredibly high. 70, 80% of the trained data is good looking white males. But so think about that across all spectrums, not just images, but text. All the text that's been written. So anyway, but the key answer to your question, Mike, is sort of the field that everybody's sort of screaming and hollering about, and it's sort of on my to-do list of a long list of things I don't have time for, but explainability. And I think that's a topic that is really worth trying to understand, trying to get and the model providers are notoriously bad. Not only, even some of the open source ones don't provide their training weights. right? So there's a whole difference between completely closed. We don't even know what they do. We don't know what they do. There's, we're open source, but we don't provide the training weights, which basically good, thanks, like, thanks, but no thanks. So.
Well, let me ask you another question about that, because I'm trying to figure out, why are these AI models so quote unquote overly helpful to the point where they will tell me something that they think I want to hear, or they're just trying to provide some sort of answer rather than just saying, I don't know, or probably here's my best guess. But it feels like we're waiting these things to be my best friend when I just need it to be quote unquote helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's part of sort of prompt engineering, right? Like almost every canonical 101 prompt says, if you don't know the answer, don't answer it, or say, I don't know. Right. So that's sort of a 101 prompt. So yeah, but you have the same problem with humans, right? Let's say there's always the one in the crowd that, the Cheers, the guy in Cheers, right? Not Norm, but the other guy, right? With Cliff Clavin. He would answer every question. Mm-hmm. You always have one of those people in your workplace. So the thing I always like to say is, people hallucinate as well. Computers, LLMs. People give you wrong answers. The Cliff Clavin of the company, if you ask them, hey, I got this problem, and there's this library, they're like, it's just an instinct to tell you a wrong answer. Or they'll tell you an answer they think is right, but they don't really know the answer. Based on their level of knowledge, they're giving you the right answer, but it's wrong. So I'm like, okay, Cliff, have you ever worked with this library? No, I actually haven't. Okay, now I'm going to go to somebody else, right? Like, that's the kind of dialogue you have to have with these LLMs. You have to think about it, because the key is the natural language. And the thing we have to learn is, how do we have discussions with humans to solve problems? And even though we're not dealing with human, we need to sort of apply those type of, and to your point, Mike, the fatal flaw is that people think they're magic. And like, I'm just going to ChatGPT and give me the answer. Like, but most people are intelligent enough to not go to Cliff and say, hey, Cliff, give me the answer. Give me the stock that I should buy today. Like, we don't do that with people.
All right. I guess, folks, whether you're taking advice from a machine or a person, you should consider the source, because basically, the information is only as good as what went into it. Folks, we'll be back with our third block in a minute.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Techstrong gang. Well, Meta, formerly known as Facebook, has a new version of their Llama AI model. This is open source, and it's being noted for its energy efficiency and scalability. So I decided to take a closer look at Llama 3.1.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Schneider with your Ecotech Analyst Insights. Meta's Llama 3.1 marks a notable shift on the AI landscape. This open source large language model aims to rival its competitors while prioritizing energy efficiency. At its core, Llama 3.1 employs quantization, a technique that streamlines calculations using lower precision numbers. Early benchmarks suggest Llama 3.1 competes well with top models across various tasks. However, these results await real-world validation. The model is flexible. Available in multiple sizes, organizations can select the version best suited for their needs and resources. This scalability could drive energy savings as AI adoption expands. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg highlights Llama's open source nature. He says he wants to ensure that more people around the world have access to the benefits and opportunities of AI, so that power isn't concentrated in the hands of a small number of companies. There are headwinds to contend with. The largest version of Llama 3.1 demands significant computing power for training. This could potentially limit adoption by smaller companies. The open source model also raises valid concerns about misuse without proper safeguards. As the AI industry continues to evolve, models like Llama 3.1 could play a crucial role in driving a broader transition towards open source, energy efficient solutions.
Llama 3.1 is open source. And as you saw, Mark Zuckerberg is very optimistic about this way going forward. And we also talked about some of the processes involved with Llama 3.1, what makes it unique and energy efficient and scalable. And John, I know you have some thoughts on this process that we were just talking about.
Yeah, I would guess I'll start with who would have thunk that Zuckerberg would be playing the role of David in the David Goliath story. But yeah, no, the quantization is really interesting. I went in, I sort of watched your video. I've been trying to bring 3.1 up. I'm really, really excited on it. Like, I think you heard in past shows we've had why, I think I really want the dark horse of open source to win, because I think it's going to keep the industry honest. I think there's so many positives here. But yeah, the quantization is, again, Facebook, their technology and their innovation technology is always amazing. And this idea that they sort of reduce the processing footprint, and not to get too technical, but going from 32-bit floating points to like 8-bit over scale, that sort of changes the cost, the power, the aggregation of just changing the processing, sort of word length, as they call it in sort of us old assembler programmers. But it becomes this interesting trade-off, and like only a scale like sort of Meta could probably pull this off. Like there's a little bit of hit on performance, but the cost outweighs the aggregate cost. And then the bigger thing is it becomes much cheaper for inference, so it's a little more costly. I mean, more processing time for the training. But again, most people using these models are doing more inference than training. My surveys, informal surveys of targeting people, very few large enterprises are training models in this new Gen AI space. And so the inference savings, I think, is another great part of the trade-off. And then, it allows wider usage because you don't have to have really sort of very complex GPU rigs. At least that's in theory. I haven't prototyped or tried this. So yeah, I think that the quantization is, I think, a sort of not a great way to describe it, because your mind goes right to quantum computing, and it is not quantum computing. So maybe they wanted that effect, but if you sort of look at it, it's really sort of reducing the sort of instruction word length, which then has like vast implications of cost savings and utilization, all the things that add up for running large data centers.
That's true. There were different analogies to describe it. One of them was taking a picture and having one at different resolutions, but getting the same results. So I think there's different ways to kind of break it down. But one of the things that's interesting about this model, I mentioned that it's scalable. So different businesses, let's say we're looking at smaller ones, they might be able to get the smaller version of this model or the medium-sized version of this model. So it does have that scalability.
Yeah, no, and then, again, I think what's also fascinating, they're comparing, the 405B, right, which is the, 405 billion parameter set is still well under GPTs, but they're actually saying that it really is, it took them 16 months to catch up to what's GPT-4, which again is another great sign for the dark horse of open source. So, and if you start looking at sort of what it claims to do, or what, Jan LeCun, who works at Meta as part of this group, has published some interesting sort of comparisons on LinkedIn. They're saying that we have an open source model that in many respects competes directly with, GPT-4 and maybe GPT-4o. I'll be cautious there. GPT-4. Let's not go crazy.
So,
that's significant.
So, John, will open source ultimately carry the day here in the way it has in other categories? Is it going to play out the same way? Because right now, proprietary models seem to be have the edge in terms of performance and capabilities, but over the time, will open source kind of carry it?
Well, I mean, just to be a little contrarian, like open source still hasn't carried the day in like other fields, right? It is like enormously being successful in the aggregate of everything that's happened. You couldn't have Amazon without open source. You probably couldn't. You couldn't have Uber. You couldn't have Airbnb. Like all these sort of. But I don't like. We still struggle. Like when I do a lot of evaluations for startups, right? And like it's a coin flip, and probably even more than a coin flip. Than for in the going proprietary route than it is open source, because the business model still doesn't seem, there's only been in my mind one successful company that has really taken advantage of open source, and that's Red Hat, right? So, in answer to your question, I think we need it. I've said this over and over in this, in this Techstrong gang interviews that we've done, and is that we have to keep the balance. Because we need the transparency, we need the explainability, we need the ability for, what we don't want is three companies owning this, right? And that's what Zuckerberg is saying. But I think how this all plays out is still, because I mean, I don't know when the GPT-5 is coming, but like the difference between GPT-4 and 4o, it was, in my experience, incredible. So like if they've got okay, we caught up. And then here's the other like little bit of scary part I have is if Meta's the only one doing this, then what does that mean? Right? I mean, there's Mistral and they got great funding, but Meta's right now, maybe depending what NVIDIA wants to do, I don't know. Maybe I'm sort of going crazy here, but like if there's only one player that can even keep up, and if like we don't, like, do we really trust Facebook to always do the right thing here? So I don't know. It is, again, the only thing I can do is like what I've been doing pretty much the second half of my career is rooting for open source and and believing that open source is a great vector for just many levels of success, not just monetarily.
Mm-hmm. I have another question, kind of unrelated, but you mentioned small models. So we keep using the phrase large language models, but you hear the phrase small language models now and medium-sized language models, and they seem to be coming in T-shirt sizes, small, medium, and large. So do we need to kind of change the way we think about language models because the terminology we've moved beyond it?
I mean, I guess I'll go first. I mean, I think we talked about this in a previous, but the way the small language models are evolving is very fit for purpose, right? Like if I'm doing edge work and I have a very specific domain that I want to solve problems for, good friend of mine, Joseph Enox, he works at a company with Vision. He was at our first Gen AI hackathon, right? UVT, and he's doing work for California Edison, right? And they're building when they started, they weren't calling them small language models, but he's literally creating these LLMs for people who climb up on telephone poles who need to get real accurate information for how to fix those incredibly dangerous things, right? And so that doesn't need to have a model that can tell you who Aristotle is or what abductive reasoning is, or right. It just needs to get you to the system of record answer that is legally bound, that basically doesn't kill the technician. So I think that's where these small language models come in. They're smaller, they're efficient, they can sort of be very prevalent at the edge, and they're not designed to be general purpose. I'll answer any question you need. They're designed to be, and they've been trained to be very domain specific to solve very specific problems. So whether we keep calling them small, medium, large, or mini,
that's what that chat GPT has now.
Maybe we can call them more bespoke models.
I think that's a great way.
But so bringing the two previous thoughts together, is it possible that we might see open source models that are smaller become more prevalent and the larger models become more proprietary because they just take so much more effort to build? And will there be some sort of split along size?
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is, I think that we over-rotate on this discussion about training, even with some of the press releases of people who wrote about, the 3.1 and Meta, the Llama 3.1, which, it's going to be better for training. I mean, if you think about what people were doing before Gen AI, they were training a lot of models, but they were probably, in the grand scheme of things, small language models. So if you were doing Monte Carlo simulations or financial sort of models, machine learning, pre-Gen AI, right, was very specific in an organization to solve very specific problems, ad revenue or this financial modeling or those things, right? And Gen AI came along and created these insane models that can answer anything. It scraped 60% of the internet. It's got all this stuff, right? So really what the small language models are is just this sort of new generation of technology, the transformer model, to allow you to kind of go back and do more with less expertise. I mean, that's probably the biggest story. Like if you were creating these very, predictive financial models using machine learning in like a large bank, you had a small group of very, very high paid specialists. Now people who do DevOps or HR, or maybe not HR, but different groups, they can actually use these, like the 3.1 has an 8 billion parameter, right? Like an 8B, and I can train it. But again, I think less training is going on in the organization because that's hard. The more likely is taking 8B and building like a retrieval augmentation generation or build your own vector databases, which is a lot easier. A lot more people can participate in that example, and you can get high efficacy answers. In some cases, maybe as good as the ones that would be done by this sort of machine learning experts.
I think it also, again, comes down to each company and their needs, and depending on their needs would depend on the model, also their resources.
Hey, you started this conversation talking about sustainability, and I don't know, we've talked about sustainability in the past, but is anybody ranking AI models based on their sustainability factor?
I think so. I think that's a great point because it is becoming a little more competitive. If you watch all the recent releases from AI, just recently, ChatGPT has ChatGPT Mini, and one of the, selling points of it is it uses less energy. So yes, the pressure is on. We talked about a few days ago, water resources being overwhelmed by AI. So how are we going to offset the energy in various ways is absolutely coming into the conversation. And that was one of the leading factors in Llama 3.1, that this is a more energy efficient model. This is what they led with.
All right, folks, I think that's where we are for the day. We're going to come to an end on what I guess I will refer to now as AI Monday. Thanks for spending some time with us. We much appreciate it. And please stay tuned. The rest of the Techstrong TV lineup is following shortly. And it's just going to be another awesome day of outstanding programming. And we appreciate all of you who spend some time with us. And we look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.
I'm Bonnie Schneider, sustainability contributor to the Techstrong Group. I'm excited to introduce you to a groundbreaking new initiative from Techstrong Research, the Sustainability Pulse Meter. The Pulse Meter offers valuable insights into how environmental responsibility factors into tech purchasing decisions for key players in the industry. Position your company as a leader in the industry and differentiate from your competitors with the Sustainability Pulse Meter, offered exclusively from Techstrong Research.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the 6.5 Summit. It's day 3 and we are back and we've got a great day ahead of you. It's AI Unleashed. This week has been all about how to build new operating models for your business in the era of AI. And this day is going to start out with a very exciting speaker to open up, sit down with me as the first of the day, I have Denise Dresser. Denise is the CEO of Slack, and she's coming to us to talk to us a little bit about, how every company is going to build this new AI operating model. Denise, thanks so much for joining. It's been great to get to know you a bit, and I'm sure everyone out there has so much to learn today.
Oh, thanks, Daniel. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, it's such a topic. Look, AI has risen into the conscious of just about everyone. Consumers, businesses, we're all trying to understand how it can help us be more productive day in and day out, how our businesses can be more efficient. We're looking at driving new operating models, removing friction from customer experiences, and so much more. And, you come from a world where this has been something that's been the mission of the company for a long time at Slack, right? Slack's been about being productive, about helping be more efficient, removing unnecessary, friction from workflows. And so first and foremost, before I jump into the main line of questioning, you're about 6 months in?
Yeah.
How's that going?
I mean, it has been an absolute ride of a lifetime. It is, the funny story about me in this role is I was talking to Brian Millham at Salesforce, and we were talking about career evolution. And without even thinking the job was available to me, I said my dream job is to be the CEO of Slack. And it's a perfect example for anybody out there in the audience who's thinking about their career. And when you set yourself in a vision and you want something, making something happen like this. And so, first of all, it's a privilege to be leading this incredible company. As you mentioned, I mean, Slack revolutionized the way that the world worked 10 years ago. And it's exciting to be at the forefront of doing that again. And I really feel that Slack was made for this AI moment. When you think about how AI is going to be such a game changer in the way that we all work, and it's going to be the single biggest augmenter in the way that we work. And so I take that as a really big privilege and a responsibility to help transform work again. And so it's exciting.
Sometimes they say it's all about manifesting, one of the things
I was going to try to not get too kooky with that word on you.
Yeah. But you kind of did.
But I kind of did. I told you the truth on that. And I think it's incredible. It's been a blast. It's a privilege.
Look, for the longest time, when I get career advice from great people, and I give career advice sometimes to people who have gotten to know. And, I always say, do the job you want. And I know that's a little bit of a, you can't really just say, I want to be the CEO of Salesforce and start doing that in the morning. But I think within the constraints in the environment you're in, you're talking to your boss, I'd really like to help with this. Well, sometimes, do the job, get the job is what I always say,
I totally agree. And when you think about, it's funny how when you put an idea in your head and you want something, you begin to actually move in the direction of what you want. You begin to look at the skills that those people have. You learn, you become curious, you step into different roles. You're willing to take risks to learn. And I think you do, to your point, you kind of manifest your own destiny.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So, all right, let's get to the crux of things. Let's talk generative AI. I mean, look, no one's talking about this. So everyone's talking about this. but generative, AI, it is evolving quickly. Right. So the ChatGPT buzz of November 22, a semi-useful product. I was there at Microsoft when they launched the big Bing with, GPT in it. And you're like, is this going to revolutionize search and all these things? It's cool. But, what do you think as you've gotten to see this now? We're kind of more like 18, 20 months from the kind of onslaught. What are you seeing in terms of Gen AI and what it means for the future of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think this has moved from, as you said, a novelty or a science fiction into true transformation in business. I think it is already showing, and it's going to be the single greatest accelerant from the original vision that I talked about with Slack. I mean, it's going to help make work simple, pleasant, more productive, and I think it's going to be the single biggest augmenter of employee business outcomes and productivity that we're going to see. But I still think, to your point, we're really in the early phases. We just released research that shows that AI adoption at work has increased 60% in the last quarter. I mean, the interest is so strong, but, we're still in the early innings. And I think it's gone from this novelty where you go and test it out and try it out to something that's going to have to be embedded in the flow of work, that it's working right alongside of you as sort of this digital assistant helping you be more productive. And I think that's happening today. That was the philosophy for us in building Slack AI. When you think about that right in the flow of work, when you're looking at summarization of data and recaps, and also with Einstein Copilot. I think about one of our customers, Wayfair, that's using Slack AI really to tap into, think about Slack being the collective knowledge of your organization and really tapping into it using AI right in the flow of work. And we're seeing that through Slack AI, we're summarizing 28 million messages and on average saving 97 minutes a week. I mean, think about that. If you extrapolate 97 minutes of savings in just being more productive and being augmented to be more productive, think about that across the productivity improvements in an organization. So I think we're still in the early phases. It's going to have to be in the flow of work and the work that you already do and making that more effective and sort of in that mindset of an assistant. But then we're going to see the world, I believe, move into the fact that every application is going to have AI in it. And then it's going to move into what I think, and I don't think this sounds too far off, I think it's really going to be taking action or autonomous AI. If you think about sales, the idea that you could be in Slack or in an application and have your BDR, your business development rep, actually surfacing in there and actually making a recommendation for who to call. Or in service, thinking about recommending real-time answers right there as you're on the phone with a customer or you're communicating with them digitally, and so on and so on. So there's this evolution of standalone, really interesting. Next, in the flow of work, I think that will continue, but then it will be in applications and really showing up more in an autonomous way. And I think for us, that's the technological element of it. But I think it's going to help people, or it's going to drive people to think about how to have a new operating model for work. It's not just about thinking about simple areas for productivity. I think leaders are going to need to think about how do they bring AI into the flow of work across all of their operations, and thinking about how do you start early so that you can learn from that, have your employees feel comfortable, that it's trusted, so that you bring it into just the fabric of how you work. And, I think that every company to be competitive is going to need to do that. And, for those who haven't started, I think it's figuring out how to start small and really adopt that in your employee population. And I think it's going to help work be more fun. And that's what I really love about it, because part of the mission of Slack is helping work be simple, pleasant, and more productive, and maybe bringing a little bit of joy into it. And I think when I think about what this all means, I'm filled with optimism. As somebody who works hard every day, the idea that it can get a little bit easier and more fun, and that work's going to look a little bit different, is really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, look, you hit a lot of key points there. And I always think to myself, like, what would be optimal? You put 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people on a call, and we've heard about these workflows for a while, but there's so much that Gen AI could assist, for instance, of hearing who took different action items on and then summarizing those actions, and then, proposal generations and follow-up lists and project management, and then inputs into your CRM, for instance, because we all know that even in the era of generative AI, there's just more data, which means the garbage in, garbage out thing actually becomes a bigger potential problem. There's more data. What's good? What's useful? How does it land in the right place? And with Slack, what's really great, and what I've always appreciated, is that, you can build the workflows in such a way where you're like, okay, I just got out of a good face-to-face one-on-one meeting. And by the way, eventually this will be all on device. You won't even need to do this part. But can you quickly summarize in a channel? Like, we have a channel that's the Salesforce channel. So I went to Dreamforce. I met with an executive. I had this conversation. These were the things that we talked about. I put it in Slack. It lands in our Salesforce instance. And then, the whole experience is fluid. All I did was take a few minutes, did a quick recap on the way out. Eventually, with the on-device or using our phone or whatever, we could have it sitting there listening and doing it all in real time. It's pretty cool.
Or how about this? How about you're in a meeting and you maybe don't remember something? And what if you use, like for me, what I used to onboard when I came on board was Slack AI, because we had it before we released it. Finding information at your fingertips about that customer or about a product information. I mean, think about just what AI powered search is bringing to us. And Slack's been a huge
combination of the new recall kind of feature inside of it, then with the ability for it to sort and sift through all the different conversations, meetings, documentation that exists to get an answer. And by the way, we will hit the area. The number one thing I always used to tell salespeople early in my career managing salespeople was, don't ever say yes, say I'll find out. Yeah. And now we don't need to take the time to value of I'll go find out and come back to you is instant, because you're like, I don't know. And then the assistant's going to be able to say, hey, this is your answer.
And that's what I mean about BART. I think it's like, as I mentioned, we're still early, but I think for people like you and I who think about the future of work and we think about what technology brings, I think it's never been a more exciting time to think about how work's going to get better and how you can deliver better service to your customers too.
Yeah. I just keep waiting for the Dan bot to come out and then replaces me entirely. I just want to know if economically, if I train a bot, Denise, that is me, can that bot just do my job and can I still get paid though? Like, is it like, no problem, Dan, just go to the beach and we'll let you know when the work's done.
That we have to contemplate. I think it's going to be very exciting. But I think it's important though. I think in this conversation, I think that no, it's not going to replace you, but it's going to help you be more effective, more efficient, probably more innovative because you'll have more time to think.
Thinking time. That seems like a great idea. My only real thinking time anymore is transcontinental flights.
I know.
I can't get Wi-Fi.
I know.
That's my thinking time now. Listen, I kind of alluded to this, how things can work together. It flows from a Slack interaction to Salesforce.
Yeah.
Slack, part of Salesforce, you are not only a significant future of work and collaboration platform, you are also a major player in customer data. The biggest, arguably. I mean, obviously, everyone counts differently. And as an analyst, I got to be careful to do the emphatics, but you can say it. How are you thinking about that kind of the role, the tie together between data and work and collaboration?
I think, first of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this point, because I think that was one of the things that really excited me about the future of Slack and Salesforce together. If you think about it, Slack is like the long-term memory of your organization where all of your conversations can happen. And we talked about how you can now with Slack AI synthesize that, recap, search for information, and so much more that's coming. That I can't talk about now, but a lot more coming into the platform. And then you think about Salesforce having some of the world's most valuable customer data that is being used in the flow of work, and it is high valuable data. So the idea that AI helps you unlock not just your unstructured data that we talked about, but structured data and really combine the power of that, which hasn't been possible before generative AI. It not only drives the value home to every organization of the value of the data that you have, but really how you now have this potential to unlock that, to get even more meaningful insights. And, in years past, the combination of that, really those have been silos of data that have been trapped. And now this is a huge unlock for Slack and for Salesforce as we bring the platforms together and deliver this integrated AI solution. It's the power of structured and unstructured data together that's really valuable. And it's exciting.
It is exciting. And let me tell you something. The high value data is in your systems of record.
Yeah.
It is on your employees' devices in their productivity tools. It is, I think it's funny because everyone, and I kind of talked about the early sort of era of cool novelty generative AI, but the real value are going to be these narrower models, industry specific, based on deeply valued customer data and ERP data and operational data that can be then used to create, meaningful moats for businesses. And so it is really exciting to see this kind of all pulled together. I want to pivot, being the CEO of Slack, you are one of the sort of, the business is sort of the personification of the next era of work, meaning when Slack kind of hit the market, it was all about this change of work. It was, we're not going to email anymore, because none of us do email. We just do Slack now. And I'm kind of kidding, but the way things get done faster is always these kind of asynchronous, more chat-like, bot-driven, AI-empowered tools. And so, but part of it too has created this really always on world.
Yeah.
I grew up, I don't know about you, but I had early in my career, many, many moons ago, I had a gig where, we used to send emails like somewhere between like 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. following up on each other's stuff. And it kind of became this really terrible joke about like proving how hard we worked by when we would send the last email. I mean, there was like a terrible culture, but now it's gotten worse between texts and WhatsApps and emails and chats, and the fact that we got to be real time on social, and we get, if your telegrams and signals, I mean, you have all these different places where messages are coming to you related to work. People are burning out. Now, again, yes, automation and augmentation can help, but people are also scared. So they're burning out, but they're also scared that if they slow down, the big bad AI might come and get them. But is there another side to this? Isn't there a way that we can take control back?
Yes. Here's how I think about it. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's a known fact that we have more tools and ways of communicating ideas with people at all hours of the day, and keeping up with that and consuming information and finding information is a challenge, which kind of back to the point of what we started with Slack AI was all about finding information, summarizing information. But I think you're getting at a broader kind of mission-driven focus that we have at Slack, which is, I mentioned the mantra, Slack is really all about helping make life simple, pleasant, more productive, but it's bigger than that. Slack is where work happens. It's not just channels and messaging. And so what we are really building and have built is an operating system for work. And now it's infused with AI and will continue to do that. But the real story about that is reducing the context switching so that you can have one platform where everything comes together and you can integrate with all of the capabilities across your organization. So I do all of our approvals, all of our Workday approvals, all of our Coupa approvals. We do all of our Jira integrated and so many other amazing partners in the ecosystem. But helping to reduce the cognitive load so that when you're in Slack, things come to you so that you're in the flow of work and you can really think about, this is my operating system. This is where I need to be. And then within that construct, using things like I mentioned when I onboarded, I used Slack AI to find things. But what I also used was a capability called recap, which is there's so many channels that you may need to know about, but you can't follow all day long. So starting my day with coffee and a recap makes just that cognitive, where do I go to find everything? It's kind of like all of a sudden everything's really clear for me. I start my day in recap and I can see everything that I missed if people are sending me notes overnight. And using something that I love called catch up, which is just catching up. It's sort of like a swiping right on your mobile phone to just find everything. So, giving those capabilities and innovating really in the human-centric design of Slack and how people are consuming information to quiet that and really make it easy to find everything all in one place. And I think that's an area that we have continued to focus on and will continue to do that. And it's our mission right now, particularly to use AI to drive that productivity, to provide one place where you can go that reduces cognitive load. And, I've gotten to the point now, and I have customers send me these notes where it's like they run their business on Slack because they can and because they want to. And that's really a privilege for us. And that's our mission and mantra.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, there's so much there to unpack. I think it is our jobs to figure out how to give people balance back. I mean, look, in the connected world we live in, I don't think we'll ever work a tight schedule like we once did, especially knowledge workers. I think with flexibility, there's always going to be the debate of whether flexibility was a win for employees or a win for employers. There will be a debate. Yeah. And I think it's on us to try to kind of drive that it can be a win for everybody.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to add something to you. It's funny. So we talked about that cognitive overload and things coming at every channel. There's also capabilities that we've put into Slack that I think really kind of speak to part of managing the flow of work is also about how you set your own boundaries, right? And how you actually, for example, in Slack, how you send notification or how you pause your notifications, how you set your time zone, how you let people know what you're doing. So I do think we have more autonomy in our life in thinking about how we work and when we work than maybe we give ourselves credit for. That's not to say that we aren't always in demand, certainly in large jobs. But I think there are ways that you can also govern yourself.
Absolutely. It's always going to be driven by ambition. Yeah. So what is the ambition that you have, and how crazy are you willing to drive yourself to become the CEO of Slack? Because, as much as you may have manifested it, I'm sure there was quite a bit of work that you did in between being able to say, I want to do the job, and someone saying, yeah, you know what? You should.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this kind of goes back to the human side of like, do what you love. Do what you love. And I do feel like for me, it doesn't feel like work because I love it. And you probably feel the same way as a founder of the company. You love it. It's your passion. You don't want to shut off. Some people do, and that's fine too. But it's kind of fun when you do what you love.
As long as you can figure out how to do it when you need to. Because I think you're right. There's never a want to, but there are points where I think just for, my wife will sometimes tell me that the teapot is starting to boil, like you need to put the device down, like go watch a movie, go kick the ball around with your son, do something that's not work for a little bit. But it is good. It's fun to do things we love, and tech is awesome. It's so fun to be in this space.
Tech is so exciting. I mean, has there ever been, I really think this is not an exaggeration. I don't think there'll ever be a more exciting time for all of us in tech, working in tech, thinking about how we're going to integrate tech into our lives and how it's going to change the way we work and live.
Absolutely. So I want to have a little fun here to kind of finish off this opening keynote. And thank you so much, Denise. It's been a ton of fun. And thanks everybody for being part of this conversation. Hopefully you found some things you're relating to here. Let's do a little speed round. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. We're going to do 3 questions, and I'm going to get you, give me 90 seconds or less on each answer. Do your best. Count in your head while you're answering. First of all, I want to talk about citizen builders. Okay. Yeah. No code. It's red hot. You hear about it everywhere. Now we're even hearing about image to code, speech to code. Talk about the citizen builder and the role in the organization and kind of where AI comes into play.
Oh my God. I mean, I think this to me is one of the more exciting. And I heard the stat. So first of all, I think everybody knows this, but Slack is a platform where there is a citizen developer community. We have over 1 million developers, and there are 2.6 thousand integrations in the platform out of the box, which is truly incredible. But in the last year, 13,000 AI-powered applications have been built by our citizen developer community within Slack. This is a huge part. Number one, I hope, and we take this as a privilege, but of the users who love the product enough that they say, hey, you know what, Slack is our work operating system, and we want to do these 2 or 3 other things in this platform, and we really want to evolve it in new ways. And so this is a huge part of our ecosystem and the evolution of our product. We have customers bringing their own large language models to innovate and drive processes across the entire business. And we need our citizen developer communities to help us all shape the AI revolution. And I think the way that when you think about AI generated code and AI powered workflows and all the things that are going to be part of these applications and the technology that people are using, I mean, I think it's just going to explode. It already is, as I mentioned, just in what we've seen in the last year for us. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity. It's also a great career opportunity for people.
Absolutely. I never thought I'd be a developer. There's a whole bunch of other implications, by the way, that maybe next time you and I get on and have a conversation, we can talk about, because I think there's a lot of excitement in it. And then there's obviously tons of people who were told, go get a degree and become a programmer. And is there a future? And by the way, I still believe there is. I think it's an and, not an or. We love as a society to be binary, but I actually think there's a place for very highly skilled programmers that can do very complicated programming. And then there's citizens that understand workflows and can build it with things. And I think just like, you need Ferraris, for a small part of the world, and you also need lots and lots of Teslas. Talk about customers.
Yes.
The outcomes. So you obviously, if you understand anything, there's only 2 groups in the world that can really influence buyers. One is customers talking about their great success. And then of course, analysts.
Yep.
Am I saying that out loud? Okay. Anyways, customers, though, the biggest focus of Salesforce, at least as I've always understood it and seen it, is that you're a customer-centric, customer-driven organization.
100%.
What are your customers, seeing by making bigger investments? And I guess I could be an answer here, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you are so right. And that is actually one of the things that I find very similar between Slack and Salesforce is just this absolute customer love and dedication to thinking about the customer first. And I think, first of all, when I think about customers that are getting such value, one of our largest customers is IBM. They are wall to wall with Slack and a huge Salesforce customer. And they've been a customer of Slack since 2015. And they've gone wall to wall. And you think about 250,000 employees, 9 million Slack messages sent a day, 3,500 apps, 3,400 workflows, back to your point of just citizen developer. And I think this is just a story of a company that is automating their entire business on a platform. But then I think about just in general, the stats for our customers, and we are seeing that teams that are using Slack are 47% more productive. I mean, that is really incredible. And when I break it apart, when I think about companies by function, it's like of the customers that are using Slack in certain functions, 36% increase in win rate in sales and 32% faster resolution using Slack in service, and marketing is 37% faster decision making. Finance is seeing 37% increase in employee productivity. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I think that is our true mission, is making sure that we aren't just giving a platform where work is happening, but outcomes are being driven and businesses are growing. One of my favorite stories of automation, actually, and seeing the results of that, is Spotify. And Spotify used the Slack platform as well as Salesforce to drive productivity in their ad sales. And they saw a 40% increase in sales productivity, bringing Slack into the fold, and think about how they work with all the different parties involved in advertising. And so that's actually been the really fun part of thinking about Slack, not just that it's simple, pleasant, more productive, but companies are seeing real value and real productivity improvement across all functions. And that's, I mean, for me, I think that's what AI is also unlocking for us, is there's even more that is out there for all of us to deliver to our customers and for us to experience. And so it's kind of become the guiding light of how do we do it? And also, how do we innovate and bring AI in a way that's democratized so that you can get that immediate benefit? It's in the flow of work, and it doesn't make you think. So, you know, those are the great stories. I could go on and on forever, but customers are at the center of what we do. But the real results are what really matter.
All right. Final lightning round. Besides Slack AI, what are some of the innovations that you're really excited about these days?
I mean, first of all, there's so much still coming in AI that I can't talk about today, but you can keep your eyes out for all the innovation that are happening in Slack, just advancing the cause for AI and bringing productivity to workers. But what I'm really, really excited about that's coming out in June is Slack Lists. And I'm so excited about this because what I think about with Lists is it brings projects and task management directly into Slack. So this is how I think about it in real simple terms. You can turn those conversations that you're having in channels into true actionable work right there in the flow of work to get things done faster. And this kind of gets back to the point that we were talking about earlier, that customers feel like they're bogged down, where they have too many tools to track what they're doing. And, you know, there's a stat out there that only 34% of projects are completed on time. And so we're bringing lists right into Slack so that you can bring structure into Slack so that you can actually make the work actionable. You can tag colleagues for the work that you need them to do. You can have a conversation around that list. I've been using lists across all of our functions, not only how we set our strategic plan, but how we think about our engineering sprints and our resourcing and our projects and a lot of our marketing efforts. And they're customizable. So you can use them across every single line of business. They're collaborative, and it really kind of takes, I almost think about it as it's like the last mile in Slack. It's not going to be the last mile for innovation, but it's that conversation really turning it into actionable work and bringing people into that. So I'm really excited about it for the productivity improvements, and I've been using it. I can't wait for you to try it out. Let me know what you think.
Hey, love to get things early here. You know, it's like a badge of honor for
that happen.
The analyst folks, you know, to get to play with the toys first. So
yes,
if only I knew someone that knew someone.
If only you knew someone who could help you out.
Well, listen, Denise, I want to thank you so much for being part of the 6-5 Summit, for opening up our day 3, talking about the future of work, sharing your personal and professional insights as to where it's going and what's going on, not just at Salesforce, not just at Slack, but really in the enterprise. We're going to have to do this soon. We're going to have you back.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. And certainly this topic is we could talk all day. It's clear.
We absolutely could. And everyone out there, thank you so much for being part of this. It is the beginning of day 3. It is the final day of this year's 6-5 Summit. It has been an absolute blast. We appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. We hope you'll stay with the programming all day long. Studio, I'll send it over to you to get the rest of this day started. Thank you all.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud-native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud-native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud-native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
Welcome, everyone, to my crash course in Gen AI desktop productivity. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to teach you how to be a generative AI power user using chatbots like ChatGPT, Anthropic Claude, Google Gemini, and I'm really excited about this because this is the kind of stuff I do every day, and it's been hugely impactful for me. So my name is Mark Hinkle. I run an AI consultancy called Peripety Labs. Spent the last 25 years as an executive in emerging tech. And for the last 2 years, I've really gone deep into generative AI. Today, I help businesses understand and use AI to improve their productivity. And I'm going to give you the benefits of what I teach lots of people to do, and I'm going to do it for free. So let's get started. All right. Today, and this is from Microsoft and LinkedIn, they did a survey, and 3 out of 4 people are already using AI at work. 75% of knowledge workers use AI. And most of us, or almost most of us, have done this in the last 6 months. So there's not a huge corpus of people out there that have a lot of Gen AI skills. So we're all learning this together. 90% of those people that do use AI says it saves them time because they can focus on work, be more creative. And the majority of them, at 83%, enjoy their work more. So I know I do, and I hope you do as well. So the easiest path to generative AI is to use chatbots. And the one that we're most familiar with is OpenAI's ChatGPT. But I'm going to talk about some other ones today. And we're just gonna go through some of the strengths and limitations of each, and then I'm going to give you a power user tip for each one. And I think that if you apply these tips and understand that you can get lots of benefits from these, you may start using multiple models, multiple chatbots to help you, or you'll at least understand the chatbots that are advocated by your organization. So let's get started. And we're going to start with OpenAI. And we're recording this in May 2024. And just this week, OpenAI made a lot of announcements. And it had to do with the model or the brain behind ChatGPT. And so before, their best model was called GPT-4. And it was very good at analyzing text. And then they had another model called DALL-E, and that's very good at generating images. Now they've combined everything into a model called GPT-4o, and that's a lowercase o, and that stands for omni, as in omnimodal. So if you modes are language, natural language processing, video, and audio. And it really has been a huge improvement for a lot of people. What it allows you to do now is have really good conversations with ChatGPT, and that's in the text like you do in your browser or via the OpenAI app on your phone. And it's really added a lot of personality and empathy, or perceived empathy, in these interactions. So what I use OpenAI for is it's sort of my workhorse, and it does a lot of things like it improves my organization of thoughts. I can do research there. I can create outlines for writing pieces. I can do tons and tons of stuff. And it's gotten better in the last few days. When I put this presentation together a few weeks ago, it didn't have near these capabilities, and I'm getting a little bit surprised with every interaction I have there. One of the things that you probably haven't done, or the majority of people haven't done, but you can do, and this is my latest life hack, is I use ChatGPT with Siri, and you can download ChatGPT to an iPhone or an Android phone. But Apple has added in the last year these shortcuts, and these shortcuts will allow you to generate tasks from Siri and other applications that are more complex. So you may go into your Siri and say, "Hey Siri, ask GPT," and that will launch OpenAI, and you can, ask it questions, and it'll send responses instead of from Siri, from ChatGPT. So you can search YouTube and find lots of ways to do this. You can create your own shortcut, or they're pre-configured shortcuts that folks have put up on the internet that you can download. But if you, in a recent interview with Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he talks about the fact that he keeps his phone on his desk, and as he's working in his desktop environment, he can ask ChatGPT questions via Siri, and it gives him another channel for information. So while you may be using ChatGPT to generate text or images or analyze data, the sort of workhorse everyday applications, it's just one more way for you to leverage ChatGPT. And there's some great folks out there that have amazing tips. One of our presenters today is Nancy Bain. She's a force of nature when it comes to how she uses ChatGPT to run her business. Let's go to one that you may not be familiar with, and this is Anthropic Claude. And Anthropic Claude is and you know what's funny? If you hear that little beep, I asked Siri to do something. I didn't turn off my phone, and Siri's talking to me. So back to Claude. Claude is a chatbot just like ChatGPT, but it has a different brain. It has a large language model that is called Opus 3 at this time, and by the time a few months roll around, they may have another name. But think about these models behind the chatbots as a librarian who's read everything in the library and instantly can recall all that information and help you. So Claude is also available for free, and you can use Claude to do all the things, not all the things, but a lot of the natural language tasks that you do in ChatGPT. But where I find it to be very helpful is as a copywriter. And you know that ChatGPT often provides you these sort of unnatural sounding snippets of text that sound something like, in a world where generative AI is taking over, and they use words like tapestry and delves and landscape a lot more than I do, at least, and a lot of people. I feel like Claude has a more natural language tone, and that's where I use it. So sometimes what I do is I would actually take the text that was generated in ChatGPT and copy it into Claude and ask it to improve my writing. And that has been a huge advantage. It also gives me some more creative ideas. So if I go back to my librarian example, if you have a librarian at Claude and you have a librarian at ChatGPT, they may have read different books, so they might have a slightly different perspective. And that's what I really like is chaining those things together. And often what I'll do is take what comes out of Claude and I'll put it into my word processor, and then I'll use yet another chatbot, and this is Grammarly, which has been around for a long time as a spell checker and grammar checker, but now it has AI capabilities, and I can even use that to improve my writing. So when I first started using AI, I thought I'd be able to tell it to write me a blog post or write me a report, and it would come out just as I wanted. And the reality is it does probably 80% of the work really, really well, and 20% of it is where I really need to exercise some creativity and some oversight. So that's Claude. There's a part of Claude that is a really good resource. A lot of people don't know about it. And so when we talk to a chatbot, we use prompts, and a lot of us have probably seen on the internet, I use this prompt to do this, or I use this prompt to do that. But it's not a skill that is broadly around. And so when we want to make prompts that do repetitive things, we want to make sure that they're good so that we get a good result most often. And these prompts will not generate the exact same output every time. These models are not what we call deterministic, which is, well, like when you put an equation into the calculator, you always get the same answer. But when you put a prompt into these large language models, it has some degree of creativity, or what we perceive to be creativity. And it's actually a little bit of randomness that allows this to mimic the human creativity. So when you put a prompt in, you'll never get the same answer, but you would want to get the same general result. You want something that is written, with the same kind of style and consistency. And this is where Anthropic, the company that delivers Claude, has done a really good job. Is they have offered a prompt library to give you ideas of how to create these prompts and use these prompts. And then they give you a prompt console for prompt testing. So the Anthropic console allows you to put your prompt in there and look at the results and then tweak it and see how it changes the output so that you can get a prompt that you can reuse. For example, if you write a report every week on your status, and you can upload the transcript of the meeting notes, you may have it generate the report in the same format every time. That's where you might go and find the prompt, use that prompt in the workbench to refine it, and then save that. And I'll talk a little bit later about how I save my prompts. But if you reuse those prompts, a cut and paste into the ChatGPT or Anthropic, and you can use Anthropic prompts in ChatGPT, but the workbench is really being tested against the ChatGPT or against the Claude model. Anyhow, that's sort of my pro tip. Once you get really good prompts for repetitive tasks, you can see huge productivity gains. The next one that we have is Gemini, and Gemini came to us from Google. If you've heard of Google Bard, that was the old name. It's now been renamed as Google Gemini. And as we record this in the middle of May 2024, Google I/O just happened, and they released a whole lot of updates. It's very exciting. Google Gemini can be available for free, or you can pay for it, as all of these chatbots are, and you get some additional features. And rather than going into those features as they change over time, I'll give you the general features that I like for Gemini. And Gemini is done by Google. It has access to real-time information from Google, and that's the big advantage. It does pretty much the same thing as Claude. It's not quite as robust as ChatGPT, but it's very good. It's a good copywriter. It also has this idea of a context window, and I might touch on that a little bit later. But if you think about the context window is of the memory for a conversation, is Gemini's big advantage is it has a larger context window. So if you uploaded a large report, it can keep its train of thought. Whereas with a smaller context window, and of the three we've talked about so far, ChatGPT has the smallest of the three context windows. You may have to break up your task for a context window so that it doesn't forget what you told it. It's just like their memory banks or your memory. If you have a long conversation with someone, you most likely will remember the last thing that they said better than what they said at the beginning of the conversation. So Gemini is a little better at that memory. And it's integrated with the Google ecosystem. So if you are using Google Docs, Gemini can integrate with your docs in various ways. You can chat with your Google Drive and your spreadsheets, and you have your own Google Copilot in there. The same thing holds true for Microsoft. And I did not I'm not going to talk too much about Microsoft Copilot today because Microsoft's Copilot is powered by GPT-4 or OpenAI. And so its interface is a little bit different, but the capabilities are pretty similar. It's also very much like Gemini integrated into Google. Microsoft's Copilot is integrated into the Microsoft 365 suite. And so you might start seeing Copilot showing up in your PowerPoints and your Excel and your Word. And that's how that works. So this is the thing that I think is the most interesting. So I have a lot of documents that I save in my Google Drive. And if I want to query what's in there, or I want to write a report based on reports I've updated or documents I've saved, I like to use Google Gemini. And the way I do that is, and things are changing fast. The way I do that today is I go to Google AI Studio, which is aistudio.google.com, and I add my Google Drive to the interface, and then I can chat with my data. And that's one of the things I think you'll see as a theme across a lot of these chatbots is that chatting with your data. So having a large report, spreadsheet, bunch of emails, et cetera, and being able to have a chat to draw, recall information from there and collate it and create new works from that. So that's the exciting thing that we see from that. The next one is Meta AI. So Meta, formerly known as Facebook, has a very powerful large language model called Llama. And they have made that accessible through pretty much all of their Meta properties. That includes Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. And it allows you to access AI right in your interactions and your sort of social mediums. And they have meta.ai, which is a free portal that's much like ChatGPT, but very much geared towards their ecosystem. And so my power tip there is, and this goes for, I used WhatsApp as the example, but it's very good if if you're already a WhatsApp user or a Facebook Messenger user, you can chat directly with the AI and get answers. So, I have a Ford Bronco, and it's a newer Ford Bronco, and sometimes the radio, which is all electronic and fancy, gets stuck, and I need to reset it. So if I'm on the road and I want that information, I might text via WhatsApp to Meta AI and say, listen, can you give me a description of how to reset the head unit in my Ford 2022 Bronco? And it replies with a procedure, and it works really well. So it's sort of that on-the-go AI is how I use that. Next, we have probably one of my favorite and unique use cases is Perplexity. And Perplexity is sort of if ChatGPT and Google search had a baby, it would be called Perplexity.ai. And what it does is allows me to search for results, and it gives me attribution to those results. So if I ask it what the 10 best restaurants are in New York City, it would create that list, but it'll also show me where the list came from. So it might have come from Google reviews or Yelp or Facebook or somewhere else. And I can understand where that data is coming from and decide whether or not that result is, valid or not. So that's how it works. It does real-time web searching. It's not as creative as Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini even. It's more of a research assistant, and that's how I use it. So one thing I might do is if somebody sends me a document and I want to make sure that the document is correct, I may upload a document. In this example, there was a KPMG generative AI study, which I had a good sense was probably right, but I can upload that document, ask Perplexity to fact check the document. And then when it finds facts in there, it puts footnotes in, and those footnotes are linked to the sources. And you can, if you're doing that in a web browser, which that's the most likely way that you would be doing it, you can actually click through and verify that those sources are good sources and not spammy. And you can chat with the document, as I mentioned earlier, to actually create, to understand how those, the thought process behind that document and that those answers actually. So that's how I use Perplexity. So that's going to end the portion on chatbots. But I wanted you to be able to listen to the first 15 or 20 minutes of that, take away 5 actionable things, and start implementing them today. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about a skill that I think is important for all of us to gain. It's a skill that has a fancy name, prompt engineering, but what it really means is communicating with AI through prompts. And if you've used them, and I'm assuming if you're here today, you've generated a prompt, but you've asked the AI to do something, create a document, answer a question, create a picture, etc. But just like when you have employees or children's or even your pets, giving clear instructions is going to give you a better result. So prompt engineering is just giving clear instructions so that you get a better output. And so I'm going to go through some tips that I hope will give you that skill in a very short amount of time. So as I mentioned earlier, these models have a little bit of variability. So what you want to do is you want to reduce the variability that is undesirable and increase the variability that is desirable. And that's just a matter of creating a good prompt. And here's an example of a good prompt is you want to structure it in a way that the prompt can follow instructions. So, in this prompt, I'm going to ask it to write a blog post, and I'm going to give it a role. The role is it's a copywriter and SEO expert. And then I'm going to give it some constraints. I want it to write a blog post, but I only want it to be an 800-word blog post. And then I give it some context, and the context is I want it to use SEO best practices. And I give it additional context that this blog is for marketing professionals. And I do the next thing, and this is one of the things that a lot of people skip in their prompt, is to ask it to provide some reasoning. If you remind it that it needs to come up with examples based on real world examples, it's going to ground that model and have it mimic some kind of logical progression in what it delivers. And then in this one, I gave it a criteria. So I wanted it to be engaging. I wanted people to read my blog post. You could provide other criteria that said, I want it to be very sober in tone. I want it to be appropriate for children under the age of 18. All those are criteria. If you start thinking in this sort of framework, you're going to have a lot better results. I touched on context windows earlier, but the way those context windows are measured are in tokens. And so ChatGPT doesn't really understand the language you put in. What it does is it takes that language and it tokenizes it or creates discrete bits from your words and then applies probabilities to that. The ChatGPT has a limit of 4,097 tokens, I believe, in the context window. So that means that your text of a certain length will be remembered. It's roughly 500 words. Now that's what it was before. So this week we've seen some updates. And it probably will get to be larger context windows, but just remember, you can't just dump a ton of text in there and have it remember, because it turns your 500 words into tokens, and then the tokens are limited by a context window. But that's not, the end of the world. What you can do is when you have that much, you can chunk it turn it into chunks. So if you had an outline for your presentation or report and it was much longer than that, you could take it and chunk it out into 500 word pieces one at a time so that you don't overrun the context window, and then ask it to analyze your report. So that's my quick and dirty way to do that. There are other plugins for your browser that are called, chunking plugins that does that for you automatically. And what it does is it breaks it up appropriate to that context window. So if you're a Chrome user, you can go to the Chrome store and find that and do that. But as I said earlier, there are different size tokens, context windows measured by tokens for different chatbots. The other thing that you can do to make your prompts better is you can give it examples. So and there's a name for these different kinds of learning that the models do. And when you don't give it an example, you just give it a prompt. Like you type in, create a story about a dog leaving the pound, and you don't give it an example of the story, that's an example of a zero-shot learning. But if you want to give it examples, you can give it one or two examples, and that's called few-shot learning, where you say, give me a story about a dog leaving the pound, and you give it an example story in your prompt. That will show the model what the right kind of output is. And then the one that's many-shot is if you gave it 10 examples. For example, say I wanted to write a tweet about, an X.com social media post, and I wanted it to be about, a tip around how to use ChatGPT better. I might provide 5 tips or 10 tips in my prompt so that it knows what they look like in the format that I would want it. So 280 characters for X. And then it will look at my examples to inform its outputs. So that's called many-shot learning. So here's an example. This is a little bit of an eye chart, but if you look at what I did here is I used a type of formatting called Markdown, and it's just a way to convey formatting in a piece of text. So Markdown sometimes is written and then converted into a rich text format or into Word or HTML. So I took that original type of format where I had a role, an objection, instructions, format, etc., and then I added examples, and I wrote it in Markdown. So by writing in Markdown, it helps to organize the prompt and make it more understandable. I also added these examples below here so that it would know what I wanted it to look like. So I gave it the role, content creator. I said the objective is to create a tweet, and I can even be more specific that promotes an event, shares news, increase awareness. And then I gave it instructions, and I did that in a ordered list. So specify the topic. I said to use clear, concise language, include hashtags, ensure the tweet is engaging. And then I gave it a format that said it shouldn't exceed 280 characters. And if it was applicable, a call to action. And then if you see here, I said, now let's start by terming the specific topic you want to tweet about. If I don't answer that in this format, it'll actually prompt me, especially in ChatGPT. But that's the sort of variability that I keep this as a template, and then I use my examples below. So that's sort of what a high quality prompt would look like in the way I write my prompts. And then when I have a good one, I just save it in a library. So I use Notion, you could use Word. There's lots of ways to do that. So I chose Notion initially, but then over time, there's a number of extensions for Chrome that came out, and I use them more often now. So 2 of them are AI PRM, which is you pay for, and then Prompt Forge, which is free, and you can pay for additional features. But what I do is once I get that prompt into a format that I want to reuse it, I can save it in there. In the AI PRM, it shows up in the background of my web page as an overlay with all my prompts. And it has a library of prompts from other people that I can use. The same thing with Prompt Forge. It's a little different. It floats on the right-hand side of ChatGPT, and I can open a file cabinet. And then I just can either create and save prompts, or I can run them, and it inserts it right into the ChatGPT interface. And these prompt managers, as time goes on, I believe that Prompt Forge supports other things than ChatGPT, like Claude. So that's pretty much an overview in 30 minutes of how I think you could be really, twice as productive as you were previous to Gen AI without a lot of work in 30 minutes. Every week I share tips like that. I create a prompt of the week in the newsletter. Same name as the conference. You're already signed up if you attended here, but the AI Enterprise.io for productivity tips, strategy, and I hope you subscribe and stay subscribed. Thank you for your time.
I'm Melody Brew, Vice President and Principal Analyst at More Insights and Strategy, and I am so happy to introduce you today to Alan Masrick, CEO at Avaya. Welcome, Alan. How are you?
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. I'm doing well. Good to see you again.
Great to see you, and I'm really excited to be talking about all of the new things and this experience economy. So we're going to talk today about the experience economy and how to add value to business, employees, and customers to innovate, accelerate, thrive, and win with customer experience. So, Alan, recently you discussed your formula for customer experience with the CX plus EX equals BG. Can you talk about that and help understand that formula?
Well, so the BG is business growth.
Yes.
We're all very familiar with CX, customer experience, EX, employee experience. And we've distilled it down to this formula because, well, first of all, at the end of the day, all of our customers, often the largest brands in the world, they're all trying to win based upon their ability to differentiate their customer experience, to provide a better customer experience than their competitors. Every company at the same time is trying to focus on business growth. Those outcome measurements, and you can call growth revenue growth, profitability, shareholder value appreciation, but think of it sort of in aggregate of business performance, business growth. At the end of the day, you can't, in a vacuum, deliver customer experience without at the same time delivering a great employee experience. And that's why we've come up with the formula CX plus EX equals business growth. Now, when you think about EX, and that's the one that's a bit misunderstood, is think of the challenges of your classic contact center agent. It's a tough job, high turnover. But if that's the person who is the first point of interaction that the customer has with your brand, and that person's only been on board for a couple months and is not very familiar with the products, how good an experience can the employee, can the agent provide the customer? It's a challenge. So what you have to do is you have to provide the software solutions, which we do, that help the employee answer the customer's questions, do it in a way that is quick and satisfying. It's an elegant experience so that the agent their job is better, they're become more tenured, and they have an opportunity to deliver that customer experience. I've often spoken about that boards and other CEOs like me, what we think about is business growth, is business performance, shareholder appreciation. And so the key thing that we advise IT professionals who are involved in buying our solutions is, let's get the language consistent. Talk in terms of the outcome, and then, work backwards from the outcome. And so the whole idea is, how do you focus on the business growth by having the tenured, satisfied agent with all the information necessary to answer that query from the customer and provide a better customer experience? So it's CX plus EX equals business growth.
Yeah, and you're so right that the employee experience really does impact the customer experience so much. And there are so many ways to help improve that are just getting more and more advanced. So let's talk about one of those things, which is AI.
No conversation will go on without talking about AI, but
we made it like 3 or 4 minutes, but that, this is the whole.
But we laughed, but in the customer experience industry, AI will have more impact than any other enterprise software vertical that, virtually any of us can think about. Why? And it goes back again to the formula CX plus EX equals business growth, which is all of our brands are very focused on how do they optimize the customer experience on the one hand, and how do they reduce cost on the other side. The highest cost that every one of our brands have is the agent within the contact center function. And of course, the agent who is involved just in a voice call, in that synchronous one-to-one interaction, you can't deploy that agent to do one-to-many because they're tied up in a one-to-one voice call. So the beauty about digital channels on the one hand and AI on the other is that it gives the employee, the agent, ability to answer the questions better, and I'll come to that in a moment. And it gives you the opportunity to deflect so many of the calls or interactions that are coming in for routinized requests. I want to do a password reset, or I have a billing question, or what have you, which is very discouraging and boring to the agent, and then undermines the agent experience. Going back to the formula, you want that agent, that employee's experience to be optimal. And so the ability for AI to come in and deflect, whether the interaction comes in digital and can be deflected through chat, or comes in through voice and through some sort of voice bot, using AI to how you intelligently route that interaction, so that at the end of the day, the human, the agent, is involved in a more interesting, complex interaction where human interaction is required, where the empathy of somebody is really required, and it's a complex interaction. That's a more satisfying experience for the agent, and then it puts the agent in a position where they can solve the customer's problem. One of the beautiful things about, new forms of AI, generative AI, is that your generative AI systems can be listening in the background and bouncing the query from the customer against the knowledge database. And even when you get sort of obscure questions from a customer, you're popping into the text stream for the agent what the answers are. So again, go back to the formula. It is a more satisfying experience for the agent because they're involved in more complex, interesting interactions. The easy things get solved very quickly via AI, and even the more difficult things, because Gen AI is in the background listening and bouncing off of the knowledge database, you can answer the customer's queries that much better. You get CX optimized plus EX optimized. That's what's going to equal business growth.
Yeah. And so I've heard you talk a lot about innovation without disruption. And so how can companies bring in AI, given the importance of CX and EX? How can companies bring in AI without that big disruption?
So the concept of innovation without disruption, which is the core value prop of Avaya, is that for many years, and I've been in this industry for a long time, we used to think that, well, in order to innovate, you have to disrupt. But it's not true. And so if you think about our very large base of customers, again, Avaya has the largest customer base in the world in these categories around enterprise communications. You've had our core voice infrastructure for many, many years. And not only is it the most battle-tested, mature, fully featured solution, but it's also been bespoke throughout the customer's environment, tied into all your other workflow systems. The notion is you don't want to disrupt that, but at the same time, you want to pull in innovation often, or most often, over the top from the cloud. So it really is a hybrid at its simplest, where I can bring in all those digital channels, all that AI utility, whether it's provided by Avaya or through our third-party partners, and it pairs with what's coming from the existing on-prem voice. So from the agents and the company's perspective, you're getting all the innovation that you want and need without going through the rip and replace of taking that core infrastructure out. We're all going through change fatigue as things in the enterprise software space are evolving so quickly. And we've all been involved in situations where a vendor comes in and says, my stuff is the new cool whiz-bang thing. Rip out all the things that have come before it to go to my new cool whiz-bang things. And they may be very cool and whiz-bang, but the amount of disruption that you go through, and the larger the company, the more complex the deployment, often the more regulated your industry, or the more secure it is, or in certain geographies of the world, the ripping that core out is not just change management, it's fundamental business risk. So we're saying at its simplest, innovate, bring in digital channels, bring in all the elements of AI as we described before, but don't disrupt the core. Then what happens is, as let's say voice gives way to digital and all sorts of AI utilities, and prem gives way to cloud, because I think those are two undeniable trends. You can stay intra-Avaya as your customer interactions are moving voice to digital, or your infrastructure prem to cloud. You're able to move that seamlessly without ever going through the rip and replace and that fundamental disruption and related business risk. That's the idea of it. And AI is a very significant element of that. Often we hear from customers, last word on this. And remember, we are disproportionately skewed to these very large customers. They have 10,000 contact center agents. A lot of people in their mind are saying, a lot of customers are saying, well, why would I rip it out to go somewhere else and take all that risk if I believe that over some number of years, AI is going to help me lower that staffing, because I can take routinized queries and answer them through AI and all the other things that we just described. Our counsel to clients is, hey, the best thing to do, because you have to innovate, we all have to modernize, but to do it without incurring that fundamental business disruption, that fundamental risk. And it's actually a less costly solution as well. So when you combine all those benefits, it's resonating really, really well with the customer base.
Yeah. And I think, in addition to reducing staffing, or not only just reducing staffing, it's giving such a better experience. Like you said, those jobs are really hard at times. You don't usually call the contact center when you're in a good mood. You call them when you have a problem. So
Right.
giving those agents the opportunity to do more meaningful work is, I think, that's such an added benefit of this too. So, okay, last thoughts. So how AI fits into the contact centers, and, basically we're just saying the future belongs to those companies who can bring these things together: customer experience, employee experience. What's your advice to companies kind of trying to embrace this, who haven't embraced it yet? What's their next move, and where do they go from here?
So I think that AI is critically important, but it's also in an enormous hype cycle. So what I counsel customers all the time is be very careful about the return on investment you're getting in that AI investment. Because AI is really cool and it can do some really cool things. Be careful, though, that you're not kind of chasing the shiny penny to do the cool next thing. You want to build your capabilities more pragmatically. Get a return on investment on those big dollars that are increasingly being spent on AI. Focus on the outcome. Go back to the formula. How do I get to business growth? Always stay guided by that formula. The other thing that I think is very, very important is I think we need to think about the customer needs to think about the KPIs differently in terms of how they manage their contact center. So for years, you have this high cost agent base. So we thought about everything from an efficiency metric point of view. Average handle time was one that everybody tracked the efficiency of the agent based upon average handle time. Get off that customer call as quickly as you can. The reality is you need to think about quality metrics, trust metrics beyond just efficiency, because you actually may want longer average handle times, not shorter. That's the irony of it. Because if the simple routinized queries are being handled by AI, then the human is involved in something that is much more complex, requires human empathy and human interaction. It's going to take longer, but that's what's going to make that customer happy. It's going to be a rewarding experience for the employee. It's going to help differentiate your brand. And it goes back to the formula: CX plus EX equals business growth.
That's great. And I actually when I was at Avaya Engage, I talked to a couple of customers about that. And I feel like there is a little bit of a tide shift now of people starting to realize that time to resolution is not the most valuable KPI. And I was really happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for joining us. And thank you to everybody else for joining us for this great Spotlight keynote, The Experience Economy. I love that. That's a good phrase. Again, this is Alan Mazurek, CEO of Avaya. I'm Melody Proof from More Insights and Strategy. Thank you for joining us at the 6.5 Summit AI Unleashed, and we will see you next time.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Great to be with you.
Thank you, Alan.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Randy Bias, who's the newly appointed Vice President of Open Source Strategy and Technology for Mirantis. And we also have Sean O'Meara, who's CTO for Mirantis. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hi, this video. Thanks, Mike.
All right. You guys have a new formal program around open source that Randy's going to lead. Randy, why don't you walk us through what's going on here? Because Mirantis has been around the open source space for all of its existence. So why do we need a new formal office and program?
That's a great question. Basically, so I've known Mirantis for a long time. We've had a relationship with the co-founders for 15 or so years before they even joined the OpenStack movement. And I've seen their evolution as a business. And in the early days, they were very, very active upstream contributor. They were making some key contributions in areas that were critical, that made a difference to the communities. And all of that noise that we were making generated a lot of inbound customer interest. And then kind of over time, we sort of walked a little bit away from that and became a little bit focused on our downstream products, and realized that it would be in our best interest to kind of go back to our original roots, to be the best open source community participant that we can be, and to lead in terms of thought leadership in each of these communities, to really drive the direction of things like Kubernetes, Cluster API, OpenStack, and so on. And so we decided to kind of reinvigorate our processes and open the open source program office, and to kind of double down again on our roots.
Sean, I think everybody has the same basic struggles when it comes to open source. Is where's the line between that which I contribute back to the project and that which I try to help customers with some sort of capability that I can monetize? Where is that line for Mirantis? How do you guys kind of come to those conclusions?
Yeah. It's always a challenge. And as Randy mentioned, that's been a challenge for us for a while. The reality is, the way Mirantis is looking at today is, to be good citizens of the community, we need to push as much as possible back into that community. We have a large enterprise customer base that we're learning from. We're helping them solve problems in the real world. So our policy as we move forward is to lean way more heavily into pushing everything back into that community, trying to hold absolutely nothing back, but making sure what we are pushing back into the community is stable and ready to go for enterprises. Finding that balance point is going to be the big challenge that we're having Randy deal with. I think he's starting to realize the mountain that we're giving to him, but it's really important because we're taking that innovation and we're supporting that innovation that's being created across thousands of organizations that are contributing to open source. And to be good citizens, we have to also provide some of that innovation back into the community. It also gives our customers, at the end of the day, a sense of safety, I suppose, that allows them to say, okay, they have a choice and they don't get locked into a single vendor model. And as we see with some of the funny games happening in the market today, with organizations changing, never mind licensing models changing, but also large organizations creating lock-ins, we want to give our customers the peace of mind that that won't happen going forward.
All right. Randy, to Sean's point, what is your assessment currently of the open source community? Because there are all these changes to licenses and acquisitions. What's your sense of where are we?
Well, there's a couple of different pieces to that question, right? So there's the open source community as a whole, which I'll kind of respond to in a moment. But I just want to point out that not all open source communities are the same, right? So OpenStack is different from Kubernetes, is different from K0s. So it's not monolithic. But what we have seen is we've seen a lot of businesses come out and use open source as a business model to basically drive their own products. And then when they realize that those products, anybody could take their open source and do something with it, they started to try to put moats and walls kind of around with using sort of this fancy licensing models that were just trying to be free, even if they weren't open source. We saw it with Terraform, we saw it with HashiCorp, and basically we've also seen people kind of rebelling against that model and going and forking those projects. And I think it's pretty clear that what the world wants, what businesses want, is 100% pure play open source, and they want companies like Mirantis to support that open source for them.
One of the things we've heard for a long time now is that the organizations that are consuming open source aren't contributing enough back to those projects. It varies by project, of course. Some have huge communities, but others are small and need help. Sean, is there something that Mirantis can be doing to maybe help enterprises make those contributions? Because I think part of the issue is just inertia and that they don't know how to contribute and they don't know where to engage.
I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do as Mirantis. This is a big part of what we've tasked Randy with moving forward. We see the same challenges internally for us. We have a huge number of changes, fixes, bugs, new additions that we make to open source products, but just finding the time, balancing that need to deliver software to customers, deliver fixes to customers, and negotiate all the challenges of just contributing to community, getting accepted, frankly, the politics. Sometimes getting code accepted in the community has a political edge to it because we're contributing with our competition in many cases. That's who we're collaborating with. From the commercial side of things. The reality is foundations, and the foundations like Open Infra, the CNCF are a big part of that, and they have to take on the mantle of ensuring that the politics doesn't get in the way of those contributions. But from us, to answer your specific question, how do we help our customers? We help our customers by allowing them to contribute through us back into those communities. There are always legal challenges. We help negotiate those legal challenges. We take on the mantle of, say, if we have a customer who creates code, makes a fix themselves within the base, we can then work with them to balance that, validate that, and make sure there's nothing in that they don't want to share, and then contribute on their behalf. Very often giving them credit for it, or always giving them credit for it. So that's how we balance it today. And we've been relatively successful with that.
Randy, in your experience, the smaller projects seems to be the places that we're having the most challenge with these days. What is your best advice to those people who have a project that others have picked up and used, but there's still a small team and there's more people kind of banging on their door for security patches and whatnot? But is there something you see among the maintainers that you wish that they might consider?
I'm curious why you think that there's more of a challenge for the small communities. I kind of see it the other way around. I feel like there's more challenges for the larger communities.
Well, you could be right, but the wrap is that the Linux community, for example, has tons of people contributing and there's tons of peers, and that community is more self-sustaining than what we saw maybe with, say, Log4j, where it was just a handful of people who were rapidly overwhelmed and probably surprised how many people were actually using their software.
I see. So the downside of sudden success, catastrophic success.
Right.
I think for small teams, right, you're just going to have to figure out some way to rate limit things. You're just going to have to throttle it, and you're going to have to point out to people who are coming to the community who are consumers only and aren't contributing back that if they want things to be different, they're going to have to pony up resources. I think that's sort of just an ongoing challenge for all communities, right? Everybody who uses open source doesn't contribute back to it. There's no way that can be true, right? You've got a mix of people who are consumers of the software, people who develop the software, people who are consumers and developers of the software. And in the case where you suddenly get a lot of consumers and you've got a very small number of developers, you're going to have a challenge. And I think that you just have to rate limit kind of the requests in the community and basically create a forcing function for those consumers to pony up resources to help you out.
And I would posit you should also probably consider, and for example, Log4j, we a while back spoke to the developers there. Somebody who's a fantastic developer is not always going to be a fantastic community manager. And this is an opportunity for you to partner. Come talk to organizations like Mirantis, come talk to organizations like the CNCF. Talk to those organizations that have customers that are using that software, using the code, and then ask them to support you. In many cases, we would happily step up and do that. I think that's also another opportunity. The risk to our customer base of a piece of code, which is core, Log4j is a good example, where there are 2 developers globally who are trying to keep up with a huge amount of demand. Don't take that risk on yourself. Ask for help. You'll find that the community will step up and find ways to help you, whether it's financial help, guidance, governance. And that's where we would also like to, have the community look at us that way. We don't need to own it. We don't even need to have any rights to it. But we also need to understand that those things are very important to our customers, and we'll find ways to support our customers.
Randy, I think a lot of people, when they think about contributing to open source, they're like, well, I don't really write code and it's not really my thing. But there are other ways to contribute, are there not? I mean, it seems like the community needs as much help with everything from documentation to managing the politics. So are people kind of having a narrow focus on what they can contribute?
I mean, in my experience, lines of code and development is sort of the least of your problems. I took over the Tungsten Fabric community and forked it from the Linux Foundation into OpenSDN last year. That's a very small community when it was under Linux Foundation, and Juniper Networks was contributing. There was a lot of activity. Now there's not so much. And where I'm hurting running this small community is on documentation, bug fixes and code reviews and all the small stuff around the edges, right? So I'd say that code contributions are the lowest priority usually.
Sean, everybody and his brothers watching what's going on with AI these days. How do you think the open source community will evolve around AI and all these LLMs that are floating around out there? Because historically, at least over time, open source wound up being a better driver of innovation, but will that play out in the realm of AI?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing it already. Just look at the community of tools around the AI space. Investing in large language models, which is all the rage right now, is incredibly expensive. That's not really something open source communities are going to be that. But the ecosystem around that, everything from the vector stores to a great example is something like the LangChain community. The tools that support and extend that open AI space are what really are making the difference. That's what's making it accessible to everyday developers. And we're starting to invest there ourselves. We're spending a lot of time there. We're looking at how we can leverage those tools within our enterprise products to make the operational experience better. And it's all enabled by open source communities. The big ones are smaller companies that are fully open source, like PromoDB or, as I said, the LangChain community, and many others, companies like Hugging Face that are really encouraging that community sense around development and work with, right now, LLMs, as I say, all the range, but there's a whole world of machine learning out there that's really being accelerated forward by the community today.
Randy, does the community need to rethink how it operates in the age of AI, or is the current structure where we have all these, thousands of flowers of projects that are all doing their thing and we all benefit from that because everybody's pursuing their passion? But I can't help but wonder, as AI evolves, when we need more sharing of data and integration, if the communities need to maybe work a little more closely together.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity with AI in open source is huge. And I don't just mean the ecosystem like Sean was talking about, but I mean the leverage we can get from it. It's just another tool. People seem to get wound tight about things like, there was one community, I don't recall who it was, but they basically said, you can't contribute back any AI generated code. If you've played with any of these tools, you see that you can use them to accelerate, your development cycle. I've been getting a lot of leverage from them. So is my code bad because part of it was generated by AI? I don't think so. What about the opportunities to have AI assess security vulnerabilities and tell me about whether it's something I should patch sooner or later? What about it helping with code reviews, basic code reviews? Like, is this in the correct format? Is it to our coding guidelines? I mean, there's a bunch of ways that the open source community can get leverage from AI to actually bring some of this workload down. We're just talking about Log4j being overwhelmed. I don't know the details of that, but there are opportunities when we see that happen in smaller open source communities to get leverage from these tools.
And I think the really important thing, as you were talking about earlier, is, hey, documentation's a pain, especially for developers. AI makes it easy. Some of the tools that we're using day to day to write code accelerate those capabilities. We need to get out of our own way in many cases. We can start arguing and acting a bit like we're in the creatives industry and saying that it's taking our jobs. No, it's making our jobs better. And we're a lot faster.
Randy, there's not always a lot of trust between the hardcore members of the open source community and the vendors that are in that community. How do you kind of bridge that and get everybody to kind of realize that maybe they are working together towards the same goal?
I mean, that's a challenge, but we've already seen some interesting moves there, right? Red Hat or IBM owns Red Hat now, right? They were the 800-pound gorilla. So, for somebody who, led the open source initiatives at two of the big vendors, EMC and Juniper Networks, I can say that there is a large amount of variance across those vendors and how they engage with open source communities. Some of them have been very good from day one. Some of them have learned to be. Microsoft has learned to be a great open source citizen, right? And there was huge tension between Microsoft and the open source community in the early days. So I really don't think it's a one size fits all. It's not vendors or open source. It's learning how to work together, and it's just an ongoing process and evolution. That's the role of people like myself and other OSPOs at other businesses to basically continue to level up the understanding of why open source is good, how you use it to make yourself successful, and how you be a good open source citizen as you do that.
Sean, is there some paradox at work here? Microsoft is more open and contributing more, and more of the traditional open source vendors are pulling in their horns and being less open. So what's going on ultimately?
I think this is the typical ebb and flow we see in the industry. I mean, everything comes around. Companies like Microsoft, I'm very happy to see them being a lot more open. And frankly, they're in a position to be able to afford it. Contributing to open source doesn't come for free. The oldest argument in the book we keep saying, oh, it's open source, it must be free. Certainly not. The people writing that still have bills to pay at the end of the day. What it means really in open source is open access and sharing the load. And if companies like Microsoft can take more of that load, and smaller companies that have open source roots are not able to at the moment, that's fine. It'll ebb and flow. We just need to make sure that we'll continue to keep the ethos of what open source is about available to everybody and giving people that ability to choose. That's really what open source is about. It's about choice. And we need to keep that choice open.
Yeah, I think it's critical to remember these are public commons. It's just like any other public commons, right? Like the more that people kind of work together to make it better, the better it is for everybody. And, if you're just littering on the ground, so to speak, in a park, you're making it worse for everybody. So it's about sort of that collective good. And the more collective good there is, the more collective good for all there is.
All right, folks, everybody needs to remember that we are all part of a larger community and act accordingly. Gentlemen, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, and back to you guys in the studio.
AI is all about data, so it's no surprise that enterprises are deploying their own private AI inside the firewall. This episode of Utilizing Tech brings Chris Wolf, Global Head of AI and Advanced Services at VMware by Broadcom, to discuss private AI with myself and Frederick Van Haren. Welcome to Utilizing Tech, the podcast about emerging technology from Gestalt IT, part of the Futurum Group. This season of Utilizing Tech is returning to the topic of artificial intelligence, where we will explore the practical applications and impact of AI on technological innovations in enterprise IT. I'm your host, Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and publisher of Gestalt IT. Joining me on this session as my co-host is Frederick Van Haren. Frederick, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you and I are both attended AI Field Day, of course, and one of the things that's happening in this whole AI is getting real space is companies are looking at repatriating or maybe patriating AI, essentially bringing it inside the firewall, making their own private AI. This is not a surprise to those of us in the industry, right?
Yeah, you're right, Stephen. So a lot of organizations nowadays understand that collecting data is important for AI. And as a result of this, they have been looking at ways to get value out of that data. Acquiring the hardware buying GPUs and CPUs is not difficult anymore. It's readily available and really cost effective. The only problem is that they're difficult to get, right? There's a waiting line for the GPUs. However, enterprises with that data acquire the hardware, and luckily for them, the algorithms are open source. So it's really easy for them to be self-sufficient, going all the way from training to inference and deploying those models internally.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. In fact, you and I and a lot of the people out here who are experimenting with AI aren't just doing it in the public cloud. I mean, I've deployed AI applications locally, and increasingly we're seeing CPUs and accelerators and as you say, GPUs available with AI acceleration features that you can deploy right locally. I've got one over there in this very room. It's pretty cool to see what you can do.
Yeah, indeed. I think we are now in an area where organizations by themselves can try all kinds of stuff around AI. It used to be that you needed like a PhD in order to do something. Nowadays, it's a lot easier, and certainly with the availability of data. I mean, there are still challenges. There's no doubt about that, but there is no lack of information. There's a lot of models out there available to people. There are websites like Hugging Face who deliver and provide links and source codes to build your own. They even have full-blown communities where if you get stuck, you can ask questions. So I do think it's a great time to be and working in an AI. It wasn't the case 5-10 years ago, but nowadays it's relatively easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to be bringing in a special guest to discuss the deployment of private AI, and that is Chris Wolf, who is Global Head of AI and Advanced Services at VMware by Broadcom. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Yeah, Stephen, thanks. Happy to be here.
So you aren't just evangelizing AI, you're actually helping Broadcom and VMware deploy AI services internally, right?
Yeah, I think we're a pretty unique charter, and I would expect maybe some other companies, if they had a chance to go, empty canvas, might take a similar approach. So our organization is responsible for AI and advanced service development that goes into a lot of the products that the company sells. We're really focused on bringing AI services to the VCF division. But what sets us apart is our charter also includes operating the internal AI services for the company. And that has been really good for us because it's given us a lot of insight into what works, what doesn't work, how can you scale, what are the management challenges that customers might run into, and so forth. So it's a really good blend for us, and it's proven to be really effective in terms of helping to shape what we do on the product side.
So I really am super eager to hear sort of how you're doing this and the nuts and bolts of it. But first, I'd actually love to to hear you tell us a little bit more about why deploy private AI. Why would VMware do this internally instead of externally in the public cloud or in a specialized provider or through software as a service or something? What are the driving factors behind this?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, when we first started looking at really the art of the possible, we had to do some of our own internal myth busting. Like you need hundreds to thousands of GPUs if you're going to do anything with AI or generative AI, right? It was kind of the prevailing thought if you go back the last year or two. And one of the first use cases we had was we were looking at code assist or software development and really helping our software engineers to be more productive in their day jobs. So we looked at some public cloud services, and our legal team had a really firm opinion on that, which was just no. There was too much that was unknown. There was too much risk. There was concern that VMware software IP would be used to train models that could benefit competitors, as an example. We were concerned around IP leakage, right? These are genuine concerns we hear from a lot of organizations. So that led us to look at the StarCoder open source model on Hugging Face and say, well, let's deploy that. Let's see how that works out for us. And we didn't pick even a real easy use case. We were going after C programming and ESXi kernel development, which is some of our more opinionated software engineers, which is great. Let's really put this thing to through its paces. we did have to tune the model. So we needed to take some of the code commits from our really good software engineers, and that allowed the model to not learn just our coding style, but our commenting style. How we like to do documentation for what we're building around ESXi. But what happened was pretty interesting, I think, was really the outcome of this. So the model tuning, we used a couple of NVIDIA A100s. It took us half a day to refine the model with a relatively small data set. And the result was we had roughly, from our survey, I believe the number was 92% of our software engineers that used the tool plan to continue using it, which these were two aha moments for me. So one was, we had to use less compute resources than we were anticipating. And that's been a theme as I've talked to other like CIOs and CDOs and CTOs and our customer segment. But then the other one was like, I can't get 25% of VMware software engineers sometimes to agree on something. So when you have more than 90 saying, yes, this is great, we really knew we were onto something at that point. So I wanted to give you an example, but Private AI started with really some requirements from legal. And then we started to see that we have all of these other use cases where we have this internal documentation that sits behind our firewalls. Customers have the same issues with sales contracts, legal contracts, all of these kind of things. And we started to see that we can apply this to lots of different use cases that aren't just use cases we have, but our customers have the same ones as well.
Right. So how did you find those use cases? I mean, did people come to you, or did you kind of found the use cases and build on top of them?
Yeah, it was, I guess it was a little bit of both. So there was some discovery that happened. And some of the things like in the early days, if you want to call it the early days, when like ChatGPT was really taking off, there was a lot of thoughts internally, even in the engineering organizations, that, well, I can hook this product into ChatGPT and build like a customer chat interface. And it's like, yeah, you can, but you're not going to be, we're not going to let you. Because it's the customer's data. They own the data. We can't arbitrarily say we're going to just start shipping it to a cloud and to an AI model, right? That is just, absolutely not. So things around, how can we localize AI, which is actually something in my organization we've been working on for the last 3 years. Concepts like federated machine learning has been an area of exploration for us for some time. But there were use cases that were kind of like just on the surface, and we were able to validate this with a lot of customers very early on. And the top one being like customer support. It doesn't matter if you're healthcare or you're IT or manufacturing or retail, everybody has a customer support use case. And to be able to help even just a support agent to be able to get information quicker and the right information quicker is a use case that everybody has. So we have this internal retrieval augmented generation solution that is trained on all of the VMware internal documentation. We do updates every 24 hours. So this content is always fresh. And I can ask the model anything. I can ask it for VRA scripts to do cloud integration, to configuration options, to troubleshooting details. You name it, you can ask it. And the model is not just going to give you a response, but it's also going to give you links to the sources of where it derived the data from, which is also, we found to be important. Because I can tell you our early days of running even open source language models on premises, or just in general, and this isn't just open source, this is a lot of them. When an AI model is wrong, it's confidently wrong. Right? Like you would ask it who's the CEO of VMware, and it would like make up a name that sounded like CEO-ish, but it was never a CEO in the company's history. It's like, where did you even get this from? But that's also the difference between just like a base foundation model and when you use something like RAG or retrieval augmented generation, you can back the foundation model with current sources that can really help to improve the accuracy of the model as well.
So how do you validate the data? I mean, you have your own data. How do you validate then that the data is the right data and doesn't create hallucinations?
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of testing that has to go in. The more that we can tune and adjust model weights can help in terms of model accuracy. And it is one of the things sometimes you do see benchmarks out there, and it bugs me to a degree where you are seeing benchmarks where folks are really focused on the inference times, like how quickly can the model provide an answer. And you'll see like, well, the 7 billion parameter model provided an answer in 200 milliseconds. Well, that means nothing if the answer is wrong, right? So this is where you have to find even that balance between accuracy and speed. And for us internally, we've had really good success with a lot of the 30 billion parameter models where you're not really compromising accuracy. You can get strong results, and you can still get that speed in terms of a turnaround in a couple of 100 milliseconds at reasonable scale. But there's a lot that has to go in. And then also what we've tried to do across the company is pull in other teams, because we don't want to just test within our own organization. We've asked other parts of the Broadcom business to use the same services. This is since VMware had closed the deal with Broadcom. So we have users in lots of different parts of the company too that's able to onboard and give us feedback. And that's also helping. And I'd say the last thing I would mention too is, because we're also a team that's operating services, we have a pretty unique opportunity where we get to talk to a lot of our customers' data science teams and teams that are running their AI services as well. And what we do is we get together and compare notes. So, like, what open source models or commercial models are you using? What are you how are you tuning these models? What is your tuning data set? Like, how do you go about this? Like, all that information has been really helpful for us to grow and learn. And I think for our customers as well, we try to just keep like an open exchange.
Yeah, I think that it's easy to deploy a very, very high performance Magic 8-ball that will just make up an answer to whatever question you give it. It's much better
Right.
to have one that, even if it's not as high performance, even if it doesn't have as many parameters, that actually searches the right data and recovers the right document. Because, truly that kind of, data retrieval, I think there's a lot of applications for that beyond software development and customer support, but those are certainly great examples of that. Did you find it challenging to integrate it with an unstructured and varied data set like support information, or was it something that you could easily feed into the model? How do you connect to all that data?
Yeah, no, that is the biggest and hardest challenge today. To the point that we've been developing some of our own services that we're looking to integrate into the product side, because that data scraping piece is difficult because you have unstructured data in lots of different places. Sometimes if you're scraping even like web data, the way the pages are formatted or metadata on the pages might not actually be to proper standards, and then you're just having trouble even scraping the data off the page. There is a good community in the Llama Index community. If you look at a lot of different data collectors that are being developed there, that we've also been looking at as an effective way to complement really what we've done on our own. Like, so our stack was completely homegrown, but we've recognized this as a really key customer need. You see a lot of talk right now around data preparation services and really helping to be able to feed data properly into a vector database to be used for generative AI. So yes, we've run into the problems. We have the scars, and I'd say the contribution we're looking to make is to take what we've learned and produce our own technology that can help customers to be able to collect data in a more automated fashion, do so in a way that's meeting their policy constraints as well, is aligned to their access policies. I mean, these are things where AI can go horribly wrong. Like, if I use elevated permissions to collect data, and then I have lower level of permissions being used to query against the model, now you've created a backdoor, right? And that's a real issue for organizations that you have to be really careful with.
So you talked a little bit about internal services and talking about sharing the models with customers. Do you also do data sharing with your customers? I mean, both ways, or are there like privacy concerns around that?
No, we've been pretty much open to the point that even we've had a couple of cases where we've even had our legal teams get together to talk about best practices, because even how you do a contract now around an AI service is fairly unsettled, I guess, and from a law practice is concerned. There's not a lot of legal precedent around these things. So we've tried to really take a community-based approach and just share what we've learned, listen to others, and that's, I'll tell you, that's really how we've been doing things for years, not just even in AI, but in other areas of innovation, because it's allowed us to have a much higher success rate in what we do. I look around the industry and there's lots of places that have kind of given up on organic innovation. It's just too hard to get right, but it's not as hard if you really take the time to listen and ask the right questions and not lead witnesses, right? You can really get to some good insights and find yourself to be successful. But, for us, everything from like, hey, what models are you using to other aspects of the use cases, especially comparing things around open source for, what projects are you using for model serving? Are you using commercial solutions? These are all things that help in terms of, because I think we're all in kind of learn mode here. You don't know what you don't know, so you want to hear from others. And I would say on average, we're probably doing 1 to 2 data exchanges per week with different organizations, just learning from them and they're learning from us. So we're just talking essentially peer to peer.
So we talked a little bit about data sharing. How about code sharing? Do you contribute back to some of the projects, or do you actually have your own projects that you're sharing with the community?
Yeah, we have both. So you look at, there's a VMware private AI GitHub repo that has a lot of projects that we've been contributing back. I think one of the funnest things we've done is contributions back to the Ray open source project. Ray does a lot of things. I mean, at the highest level, Ray is providing a way to orchestrate and across and scale AI clusters. We've liked Ray, though, strategically because it also has a great ecosystem of AI software companies that integrate with it. So when you want to connect an AI software stack to infrastructure, you can do so using open source Ray. And we like it because an ISV or open source project doesn't have to know or care about VMware APIs to run on a VMware stack. They can just talk Ray. So we upstreamed all of our integration work into the Ray community. We've created a plugin to vCenter that can allow that really seamless turnkey integration with us as well. And that's been, I'd say, one of our early successes. We joined the UXL Foundation as a steering member. That's something that was initially founded by Intel and several partners around one API. So that's been another area of contribution. And we also, a lot of the models that we've worked on, we've open sourced, and we have you'll see a VMware AI Labs repo on Hugging Face, so you can check that out as well. And that's just the start. There's a lot more that we're looking to contribute to in other projects in the open source space that are really important to us. And again, we want to do our role in the ecosystem. And for us, it's really about connecting AI to infrastructure in a really low cost and scalable way, because the other thing that people are struggling with today is often when I get GPUs, it might take me 3 or 6 months or longer to get more. So you have to be really smart about maximizing the capacity of the GPUs you have. And this is where technologies like virtualization play a huge role. Because when you get into inferencing, where I'm just now applying the model to an application or a use case, right? I'm oftentimes needing a fraction of a GPU. So I can start to slice up GPUs more effectively, and that's where you really start to get to some good cost savings if you're an enterprise organization.
You're right. Yeah, so that's quite interesting from a contribution perspective. Do you expect people to rely on the VMware AI stack, or are your contributions more generic where anybody can benefit from it?
Yeah, a lot of our contributions are entirely generic. Of course, we want people to run on our stack because we think we have the best platform and choice for AI services in the ecosystem. The things we do around being able to virtualize GPUs, use technologies like DRS to do more intelligent placement of AI workloads, being able to provide a common set of management operation tools for your AI and non-AI workloads. I think those are all good reasons to run on VMware. But if you look at what we've been doing historically over the past several years, we want applications and customers to want to run on our platform because they want to, not because they have to. And that starts with even having an upstream Kubernetes API service above our stack. So I can integrate with the Kubernetes API. That's what the IT ops teams can provide. And there is no stickiness there, right? You want move to another Kubernetes-based infrastructure, go for it. Right? We're not gonna stand in your way. We want to do things the right way. That's really important to our philosophy. That's been our philosophy around open source as well. And we want to be good members of the community. So you're going to continue to see a lot of good upstream work. I want to say, just to give you an idea, I just went in and approved these. I mean, just in my organization alone, we're contributing upstream, I want to say, to 60 or 70 different projects right now.
Yeah, I think that's important because in all these spaces we've seen is that there's a lot of takers, but the companies that are more open and contributing are the ones that are going to see a lot more success. And the aspect of virtualization as well. I think that a lot of people, when they hear the word VMware, they think virtual machines, and that's kind of where it begins and ends. But that's really not what you're talking about here. I mean, for the most part, apart from the idea of sharing GPUs, a lot of the stuff you've been describing is not virtual machine bound at all. In the interests of kind of the customer deployment aspect, though, I'm curious, how did the conversation go, and how do you have those talks about contributing to open source, working on projects that aren't proprietary IP, stepping back from what VMware is offering to its customers? How do people in this space make that case and have that conversation internally to be part of the community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we could do a podcast on this alone. If you think about it, for us, like if you really break things down and simplify, you can start by asking yourself, well, if I'm the customer, how would I want to run this software stack? And what does it look like? Right. And that's led us to, other open source projects I haven't mentioned, like Kubeflow, which we've done a lot of work in that community as well. You start to think about things a little differently. And, obviously there's parts of our stack that the company monetizes. The biggest thing is on-prem infrastructure is hard, right? It's really hard to do and get right and to scale. There's lots of very large companies that have tried and failed at it. It just happens to be something that VMware, we feel we're the best in the industry at in terms of providing like a comparable on-prem IaaS. So that's where we're going to continue to focus. We want to stay in our lane there. And then our open source efforts really come down to, well, how can we enable the communities and lots of other apps and services to be successful on our platform? So that's also been, I'd say, a part of our thinking is it, but you start with the customer problem statement and say, well, how would they want to really operate on this? And then the answer has become a little more clear, whether, we're doing work in PyTorch because it's such a popular open source AI framework. So there's that, contributing to UXL because we want to promote customer choice. It's trying to make all the right moves, but at the end of the day, my firm belief is you win people's trust by not doing unnatural things to make them have to stay on your platform. You want them to stay because they want to, because they get the right amount of value. So that's, at the high level, that's what's really driven our thinking. And then we do look at on a project by project basis, like what is the strategy behind this, right? So I think you want to be mindful of what you're doing in open source. I think what we've really tried to work hard to avoid is we don't, even with what we open source ourselves, we don't want to just like have somebody go and open source something and declare victory. Putting some binaries on your GitHub page to die is not a successful open source strategy, right? You should be thinking about, well, if we're going to open source something, what is our strategy to build community around it, right? How do we really engage? What are the opportunities for our community members, right? And how should they be thinking about this? One that I haven't mentioned, which I think is some of our more exciting work recently, is in confidential computing. We built a certifier framework that we've open sourced. It's with the Confidential Computing Consortium now, part of the Linux Foundation. And what that technology provides is an interop layer. So I can code an application once to take advantage of confidential computing constructs, and I can traverse AMD or Intel or other hardware-based TPMs, and I don't have to rewrite the application, which is huge, right, from a software developer and customer value point of view. But our thought on this was, when we built the technology, when you wear your customer hat, you say, well, if this was proprietary to VMware, am I just trading, one point of stickiness for another? And the answer is, yeah, you are. So to us, the right thing to do was to open source it. And now what you've seen is there's a huge community of contributors outside of VMware that are, deeply involved in this project because it's the right thing to do. We'll enable confidential computing interop on our platform for sure, but we don't think that should be a proprietary control point that VMware owns. We think it should be in the Linux Foundation where it can have neutral governance.
So one of the questions I get a lot is how to get started, right? So do you have any tips and tricks for organizations that have basic AI knowledge but want to participate in private AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is the hard part, right? It's like, well, I don't even know what to do, so maybe I'll just play around with some of these other services. But one place to get started is we've published a reference architecture. That's right now, I want to say it's 60 or 70 pages. And what's exciting about that is it's everything from, well, here's how you can take the Hugging Face star coder model and start doing your own internal code assist use case. We have that in there. Here's how you can think about sizing your network based on the size of the model that you're looking to run. And you can do a lot of this with Ethernet networking with a small number of GPUs, just enough CPUs to run your apps or whatever, and you're off and running. The investment is typically less than you think in terms of those cases. The other thing I would suggest is to pick a use case that really resonates with your business where you can get the quick win to just be able to prove the value. So like a chat interface for us is something that's really just fundamental, I think, to most organizations. Having an internal search that's smarter, that can find answers more quickly, right? These are the low-hanging fruit. And VMware's plans is to take what we've already done with our internal apps. In the coming months, you're going to see us open source these applications that we kind of call starter apps right now. That's going to really help our customers in the industry where you're looking to kick the tires and kind of see what's possible and do it very efficiently. To also make it simple for the industry, our joint solution with NVIDIA is going to be available in the coming months. So take a look at that. It's really the best of VMware, the best of NVIDIA technologies to give you a simple turnkey appliance to be able to just get started and get value from AI right away.
So we were all involved in the AI Field Day event that happened a couple of weeks ago. If you're interested in this conversation, you want to learn more, I would recommend starting by going to techfieldday.com or looking on YouTube for the videos of the VMware presentation at AI Field Day, which includes Chris and his team talking about a lot of these topics. Before we go, Chris, where can folks contact you and continue this conversation?
Yeah, there's a few places. So you can go to via.vmware.com/AI. That'll take you to our AI landing page. And you can see from there AI labs. You can see our reference architecture, all the different things we're working on, our joint solution with NVIDIA. It's all up there. The Tech Field Day content is going to be really where you want to spend some time because we have a ton of demos that we've presented there as well across a variety of different platforms, including demoing our own internal use cases that we've been operating for quite some time now. So a lot of knowledge out there. Those would be some great places to start.
Thanks so much. Frederick, thanks for coming to AI Field Day and co-hosting this podcast. What else are you into?
Well, it's still the usual thing, trying to help customers, helping them understand what AI is and provide them with a roadmap to successful AI.
And as for me, we're going to be looking forward to another AI Field Day event, hopefully later this year. We're also hosting a lot of other Field Day events. And of course, we're going to be continuing utilizing AI published every Monday. So thank you very much for listening. Utilizing AI is part of the Utilizing Tech podcast series. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do subscribe. You'll find us in all of your favorite podcast applications. Also, we would love it if you left us a rating and a nice review. And of course, we'd love to hear from you too if you want to let us know what you think of this. This podcast is brought to you by GestaltIT.com, your home for IT coverage from across the enterprise, which is now part of the Futurum Group. For show notes and more episodes, though, head over to our dedicated website, utilizingtech.com, or you can find us on X, Twitter, and Mastodon at Utilizing Tech. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next Monday.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Welcome back to day 3 of 6.5 Summit. Lisa Martin here with Corey Johnson, Diana Blast. Just coming out of a great conversation, guys, on collaboration. We almost take for granted the technologies that are empowering us to collaborate so effectively and so seamlessly. But we also know that the customer experience that we expect has changed, and it can become a huge differentiator for businesses.
And I think we're going to see a lot of change. And I think that's I think the reason people get so excited about technology. That's why the market gives technology a higher multiple, because they really believe in this sector, if you will, as a prism to change and a prism to the future. And we can hear that from Avaya as well as all the companies, frankly, we've been talking to in the last 3 days.
Well, one of the things that struck me is how Avaya was talking about how AI fits into the contact center. We've been talking about that over the last couple of days, the empowerment and why the future belongs to companies who put the customer experience and the employee experience together. Like, to me, they've always been inextricably linked.
Definitely. And it makes it that much more interesting to learn how these models are being trained, because that's how they're answering the question so seamlessly. And that speaks into just the open ecosystem that we've been touching on, about all these integrations with different technology partners and just how fast the technology is spreading across the industry. I mean, clearly collaboration is becoming a highly competitive space. Yeah. And that's also due to the rise of the AI PC, right? That everything's becoming smarter and just so much more accessible.
The modernization is fun to see. The speed up with which it's happening is crazy. But that's a perfect segue, guys, into our next track, which is on modern work. We've got HP kicking things off, talking about the future of computing. They're going to be talking about how to make AI real for people and businesses. So we are so excited to be able to share Alex Cho's vision of a future where AI isn't just an emerging technology, according to HP. It's a fundamental driver of innovation and success. With that said, here's HP.
Welcome back to the 6.5 Summit 2024, where we are talking about making AI real for businesses and consumers, and of course, building all the infrastructure and devices that needed to support that. It is our modern work track opener. And unless you've been hiding under a rock, you can see that modern work is on fire. AI is the accelerant on top of that. I can't imagine a better person to talk about this than Alex Cho, who heads up HP's Personal Systems Group. Alex, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be back with you. I'm enjoying this.
Absolutely. I do have to ask, can you tell us a little bit about that awesome background?
I'm glad you caught it. How could you miss it? No, actually, I was recently at our garage, the HP garage, and not just in the garage, but the house. And I had a chance to bring a partner there and walk around. And I personally was so inspired because it's a reflection of where innovation and really so much of what we think of the compute industry grew from, and just been an inspiration for me and for our teams. And so I thought, why not come and talk to Pat with what's driving that inspiration for our company?
No, I love that. A lot of history, and the great news, you've continued that in. And I've talked about, I really do appreciate your approach, starting with the end user in mind, starting with use cases, and also looking at what you do from a solutions standpoint. And when it comes to AI, that's as important as it's ever been. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to start 50,000 foot here. What is the vision that you have for AI in Personal Systems Group?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that when you look at what AI means for the world, for our customers, We are so excited because we believe that AI will enable us to deliver disruptive productivity. And we think that is just a massive opportunity. 10x productivity that we can unlock, unleash, deliver to our customers. What a huge contribution that would have, and also enable people to just do so much more and contribute so much more. And we think that we're really at a great place to do that, because you talk about knowledge worker.
Yeah.
We're already there with the knowledge worker. We have a huge portfolio of PCs, printers, room solutions. Now infuse AI into that to make all of those experiences that much more productive. We're super excited. Our ambition on this is only growing the more that we get into this.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple months back, but this does feel like an unprecedented time. You know, you and I are both experienced, have seen a lot of things come and go, but how does this compare to you from other moments in technological history?
Think about, I call it the 1999 moment, when I put on the background screen. I guess the other one is to put on Prince. But why? Because the internet was really a major milestone where we saw new customer experiences, business models. We saw innovation thrive, and it drove a decade of computing growth. I think this is another 1999 moment, because AI, and particularly what it means for the consumer, is going to drive all these experiences, new value, new business models, another decade of growth. And for us, we think that's a game changer. Again, it's also happening faster. If you look at the data and the statistics, as you know, if you look how long it took for the first million people to use the internet or to use other services, our phones, the first million users to use ChatGPT was far faster. So this thing is also moving faster than anything else before.
Yeah, it does feel like a special moment. And I think I was a product manager doing internet PCs at the time, and it feels a whole lot like that. And what I'm really inspired about too is when the internet went up and the build out, it kind of crashed, right? It was called .bomb. And where I think this is different is I'm seeing benefits at the end user at a incredible pace. And you talked, I don't know if you said 100x or 10x, but I'm seeing 10x improvement in employees. And I think, shortly we could see some miracle experiences related to consumer, but that is the difference that gives me a lot of motivation. So let's talk about the developer tool chain here. Right now, developers seem to be hit with this an incredible amount of choices in where and how they do things, right? It's like, hey, pick it on the client device, pick it on the cloud, but these things shall never be connected. Seems a little bit disjointed to me. And I'm curious, how are you addressing AI developers to increase their efficiency, increase their productivity?
One of the key areas that we think is going to fuel a lot of growth for us is really in addressing what you're talking about. And what is that? What is every company responding to because of what their board and their executive staff has asked them to do? And that is figure out how to use AI to drive productivity in my company or in our company. And for that, we see that the whole world of enabling data scientists to take models and customize and tune them and add in their own data to create meaningful productivity improvements in those companies, that is happening at a just unprecedented level and energy across the world. But for that, most data scientists today are operating in a world where it's a little bit DIY. They need to find the right configuration to go do that. They're trying to grab data in different places. They have different toolkits and tool sets that they're using. They need to make sure that they all work together and compatible. And by the way, this no longer is a hobby by one data scientist. you've got teams of data scientists that need to work together. And today there has not been a great way for them to collaborate. And in that space, what we have been delivering and building on is what we call AI Creation Center. It's the world's most comprehensive workstation-based solution for AI development that allows data scientists to configure, pull in tools, test, have all their data mapped, and collaborate with other data scientists to dramatically improve their productivity so they can help their companies use AI to improve productivity. So it's kind of a win upon win that we're excited about.
Yeah, I appreciate you filling in the, I talked about the gap between the client computer and the cloud. And what I'm glad you pointed out is teams working together and being able to share maybe different modifications to frameworks, maybe some tweaks that they've made to a small or a medium-sized model, or even the data workflow that they're hitting. I'm really glad you pointed that out.
Really is. Yeah. We talk about the word hybrid workforce, which is obviously a huge trend. But in the world of AI, one of the things that we really believe in is that customers, data scientists, developers, they should be able to operate in hybrid environments. And that's why our AI Creation Center enables people to work in cloud environments, local environments, share across them, not be constrained by one unique environment, and do that together with other data scientists. So for us, enabling that for velocity is really important.
So a lot of these industry transitions, I think, begs the question of, hey, where does this device or where this service, how does it change the role, right? I think I remember, was it 10 years ago, the PC was dead and everything was going to be replaced by tablets and smartphones? Well, that didn't happen. I knew it wasn't going to happen, and it didn't happen, but some people were questioning it. And then the pandemic hits, and it's like the PC is critical and the PC is vital. And that didn't mean that we didn't need tablets anymore. We didn't need smartphones anymore. But I got to tell you, it did move the PC up the food chain of importance. And I'm curious, does this new generative AI wave change the relationship or the role the PC plays in our lives?
Yeah, you're right. That's a great summary of some of the historical. I literally remember the email that I got that said the PC category is dead.
Oh, MIT Tech Review. I have that. I have that meme, and I pull it out about once every 5 years.
And then remember during the pandemic, at that time when we're watching the role of the PC, we're the ones who said the PC is essential. So we want to be clear. It's not dead.
Well,
it's essential.
Alex, I have to modify that. You said it before the pandemic, right? Yeah. And you were like, Alex, you nailed this. How did you know this?
And what we think we're entering into is with now AI, and it feels a little bit about Back to the Future, but it is probably a very good term, and that is the PC will become even more personal. And we use that, obviously, personal computers, is what's in the PC, but it's really based on the truth, the product truth, that what AI enables is for this device to provide a far more, productive, creative experience. But the hallmark of that is that it's going to be more personalized. It will be catered to you, your preferences, your settings. It will take your data. It will create a reflection of what you have seen and done to date, and it becomes that much more personal. And so this device that, has a lot of utility value, adds a new dimension because it becomes more personalized for you as it delivers more productivity and creativity. And in that way, this is exciting. And it's not just slideware. We're seeing it happening as the world of ISVs are starting to take generative AI models, embed them into their applications for the value of doing it locally on the PC. And that is what just makes this the beginning of what I call the next decade.
Okay, so you got everybody excited here, right? On the preview, a historical viewpoint, your strategic background, and how you want to align to it. Let's talk about some of the latest innovations that you brought out. You've already talked about the workstation end-to-end development solution that you have, but let's talk about the others. And I know you love all your AI babies the same, but give us the highlights here.
Yeah. Well, we are using the occasion to we are refreshing the entire portfolio of PCs that we have. And it's including and starting with what we call the OmniBook X for our consumer line and our EliteBook Ultra for our commercial line. They are the world's most powerful and secure ultra mobile AI PCs. And the reason why that's important for us is it's enabling people to use all these new AI applications locally on the device. And local has so much value because it's faster, it's more cost effective, it's more private and secure. The other thing that's important for us is that we've been able to use AI to optimize the device through a lot of first-party models that we put on there to deliver unprecedented battery life. I mean, battery life, and I know we've had discussion in the past, this is real battery life for how people use their device, whether it's video or collaboration, and getting 26 hours of battery life. We've also infused into them, what did we get when we acquired Poly? We acquired a lot of great audio and video capability. And maybe more than AI, probably what impacts the knowledge worker is hybrid work. So we've incorporated Poly Camera Pro that allows you to have the best in AI video experiences on that device, because we know that's the reality of how people work. So a lot more in there, but this is more than just the next product in another year that the company announces. This is the brave new generation of a class of devices that's powered by AI. And so we couldn't be more excited, really, for the customer. Customer wins in all of this.
Right. Hey, you've interspersed in the conversation here some of the end user benefits that the new class of AI PCs can bring. But if you had to pick the top three, I mean, what would be the top three customer benefits that comes from these?
So first is you will be able to do new things that you couldn't do before. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about, tell me what I couldn't do on this existing set of PCs. You can do new things.
Right. By the way, I may have asked you that on a stage in January of this year.
You had that big white, sweater, the cabin sweater. I remember.
I know you wanted me to wear that today, but I got way too much shame, so I decided not to.
Well, you looked very comfortable. But that is the question, and that is the inspiration, the motivation for what we're doing. That is, customers can do things now that they couldn't do before. A good example, and I think what Microsoft has been doing and championing is a great example. The ability to create using generative AI models locally on the device. It's faster. You're not paying for a subscription. It's always there on your device. And, I'm a stick figure kind of drawer. I'm a big whiteboard flip chart person. To take flip charts into immediate, beautiful renderings that can be used and passed along. Couldn't do that before. Didn't matter if I spent more money on it. I just couldn't do before. I love that creativity and productivity element. The second thing that you can do on these devices is still, as much as we have worked on devices, there's a lot of friction in them. There are things that just make it more difficult. A lot of times because you have drivers and configurations that are just not all in sync. We've enabled and we've created our own AI models to optimize that device so that it is running more efficiently, it's more effective, lasts longer, and if you have a problem, we can more efficiently get some resolution to that. Like eliminating that friction might seem boring. I'll tell you, for our customers, if you're listening to them, they want net promoter scores to be improved by eliminating friction. Much better than it was before. And I love that we can do that. And then third thing, collaboration. The ability to do this thing, but to do it better to see me better, track me faster, don't compromise on battery life because I'm doing it through the CPU versus the NPU, to do it in a way that makes it look like I have a professional agency who is video taping me or capturing me. I love that. These are that couldn't do before, not just a little bit better, but substantially different reasons why we're so excited about this next generation.
I'm glad you talked about collaboration. And in May, I saw a very provocative announcement from you and Google on Project Starline. Now, does Project Starline intersect with AI at all, or is it independent of it?
Very much a part of the master plan, Pat. So think about what did we say our vision is? It's about enabling disruptive productivity. Number one is with companies who are working on customizing, tuning models so that they can be more productive. Number two is for people and how they work on their devices. And number three, it's all about enabling AI to make what we call spaces and places more productive and connected. Companies, people and their devices, and spaces and places. And this is why Poly, the AI we're driving and enabling through our Poly portfolio, we called it Director AI to give you a better experience. That's why the partnership that we've announced and going really deeply with Google on leveraging and bringing Starline to life, which is all about AI. It's all about taking data points and enabling that interface to be far more lifelike and intuitive. That's all about bringing AI to enable people to be more productive, more creative, more connected. And again, we think it's another step function improvement in how people will work and live.
So Alex, at any intersection that we've had of just where technology reshapes experiences, sometimes the bad guys use these technologies to come in and disrupt things. And we've seen it. We've seen that everywhere. I mean, we went from, the mainframe to the mini computer. And as we distributed that compute, there were challenges. Then we went to the PC and client server. It added challenges like security. I mean, internet, right? I mean, you could download things that could end up being, Trojan horses, things like that. So how are you building security and trust into all of your AI portfolio?
And we are, we think this is really only going to become more important for our customers. And secondly, built on something that, as you know, we have been investing in for a while. This didn't start when we started to work on our AI PCs. This has been something that we have been investing in and continue to provide leadership in the industry. And that's really our device security. What we have leveraged and continue to build on is our embedded security controller and what we call our Wolf security stack. And why is that important? AI is about data, right? It's more than data. It's about data, models, inferencing. And to all of that, we are leveraging not only our security stack. We introduced earlier in the year that the next generation of our security stack is the first out there to also protect against potential future quantum compute hacks. That becomes the bedrock of how we're enabling our new PCs, because we want to make sure that not only with the new capability and processing and data and models, that we step up how we protect that data, models, and all the inferencing that happens on there so that we can enable a more secured environment for our customers. We're actually more passionate about this than ever because, number one, all of that historical capability is becoming more important. And B, for our customers, this is top of mind. We keep hearing about it. Tell me what it means about AI being about data. Am I going to be protected? And so that's where those two come together very well.
Yeah. So the TLDR is that, AI provides all of these beneficial technologies. Some of the technologies, incremental ones we haven't seen before, like models, like saving interactions that we wouldn't normally save on the PC. provide a target-rich environment, and you're using AI in addition to the other features that you brought in with Wolf. I mean, you had AI capabilities 5 years ago or more. I was at an event at New York when you rolled that out. So it's good to see that you're taking care of this. So great conversation. I wanted to end here talking about sustainability and the amount of energy that AI takes. I mean, one example, Reston, Virginia, they don't have any more power left on the grid for EVs, for people, for homes. I mean, there is none. And we're looking at all of the power to do the training of these models in the data center. And while PCs aren't sucking as much energy as these AI training clusters, it's still important because they're additive, right? We might sell 300 million of these in a year. So they're additive. How are you factoring in energy and saving energy as you create your new devices and solutions?
Well, such an important part of this equation dialogue. I mean, it really is. And I would say it's in two segments. First is, many have said, with all this AI, can't I do it in the cloud? And why do I need an AI PC? One is the rationale as to why the AI PC has value in this whole space. And that is because when you run models locally, they're going to be more energy efficient. It's going to be more cost efficient for the customer because of doing that locally versus going to the cloud and back. Now, the reality is it's a hybrid compute environment. And you're going to see increasingly from HP how we optimize and orchestrate against both. But that's really the unique value of the AI PC and why we think as a category, there's so much value to the AI PC because of the cost and energy, but also the latency benefits or the speed benefits and the privacy. The other goes back to what we have been talking about here for quite a bit of time, and that is, for us, it's all about sustainability in our devices. And a couple of years ago, we hit the magic hundreds, 100% of our devices. I mean, every PC HP ships and display uses recycled material. 100% of the paper-based packaging has been moved to more sustainable sources. 100% of our PCs are EP Gold, which is the highest rating around energy efficiency. That we are keeping up and actually continue to raise the bar with our AI PC. So not only does the definition of an AI PC become more efficient, how we deliver the AI PC has become more efficient. And so with our latest OmniBook X and EliteBook Ultra that I mentioned before, they're both part of this most sustainable PC portfolio. 50% recycled aluminum in the A, C, and D covers. I know you're PC guys, so you know what I'm talking about. That's the top, deck and the bottom. 50% post-recycled material in the keycaps. And then we go further, speaker boxes. We're using ocean-bound plastics. So we're just rehauling that entire thing to be the most sustainable device out there. And so we get energized by that, as you know.
Yeah, you have made some incredible progress, and where people want to buy new devices, you're breaking new ground on the environmental impact of that happening. I'm really glad you brought into the fact, and people aren't cluing into this yet because AI PCs are relatively new, is the more AI capability you have on your client device, the less AI capability you will need in the cloud. And it's not an either or; it's going to be hybrid, like you said. But that is the reality, and you also don't have to have the energy to move it to the cloud and back to the cloud as well. And that's something with it takes a tremendous amount of energy as well. So, Alex, you are the Modern Work opening keynote here. Any words of wisdom or words you'd like to end this with for the audience? I'll give you the final word here.
Okay. Well, maybe I can tell you what we're excited about. Customer wins. Customer wins because we absolutely believe that AI unlocks disruptive productivity, creativity, and also connection. That's why our focus in all of the collaboration space is so important. And, we're so excited because we believe it's a decade of new innovation and growth for this segment. It is a 1999 moment, as I like to say, which means we're going to be energized. We're going to be creating. Some people will be singing, not me, but, definitely we are very energized by this and customer wins, which is good for the industry.
Yeah, I'm super excited as well. And by the way, I think your team has my address. I would love to check out whether it's Omni or any of your solutions. I'd love to try them out. So, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the 6.5 again and opening the modern work track here. I mean, you have delivered exactly on the theme of the show, which is delivering tangible value, AI value to enterprise. And we've just begun here. And I'm super excited to see how this rolls out.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So thank you for tuning in to the Modern Work Track opener here at the 6.5 Summit 2024. Hang out and check out all of the tracks. Could they possibly be better than Alex's? I don't know, but you need to check it out and let us know. Take care.